Rules Subcommittee meeting?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we got through a little bit of chapter 7. The last place we edited, according to my notes, looks like chapter 7, section 1.05. That was going through talking about instructors and evaluators under length of training and in-service training.
Okay.
Does that sound right to you, Heather?
That sounds right to me.
Okay.
Commission members, does that sound right to you?
Yes.
Okay. And just so you guys know, we have a new member of the legal team on our call today. His name is Christopher Swan, and he's going to be the rulemaking coordinator for our office. So he'll be the one officially taking down the red lines. And if we have a question about what needs to be read back, him and I can coordinate just to make sure you guys are getting the most accurate reading as we edit through these today.
Okay. Thank you. Chris, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning.
For the members in the audience, I have supplied a link to the rules in the chat box. So if you would like to follow along, there is a link there, or they can be viewed on our website. Marbeth or Chris, would y'all like to share your screen with us so that we can review these rules as a group as we're going through them?
I can do that. Give me just a second.
Thank you.
All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So where we left off was down here under the 0.05 section here. And this is the rules unedited. So we can pick back up or wherever the committee wants to. If we want to just jump right back in where we left off, that's fine.
Marbeth, it's Commissioner Scott. This is what we're redlining from the rules that will go into effect July 1st, or what we currently have on the books.
What we currently have on the books. I also have a copy of the red line that was submitted to the Attorney General's office. I won't share that on my screen, but if we have questions, I'll be comparing those side by side just to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel.
Okay. I want to start this discussion off then with coinciding with the volunteer education incentive subcommittee that we've been hosting multiple meetings on at this point now. In all honesty, I think that when it comes to Chapter 7 concerning the education incentive, after reviewing what will be going live July 1st, we did do a lot of good work with this last rule red line. But there's still a lot of ambiguity in there, and it's not clear for our customers. And I think that my opinion is that we actually will look at a full rewrite of Chapter 7, and we need to look at streamlining this process a lot, because one of the things that we have in there, because when you go through our rules chapter by chapter, of course, we have it tied to different areas in our rules. Specifically, let's talk about the volunteer side. We put some benchmarks in there for them that we, as the Fire Commission, wanted to go ahead and have them obtain certification-wise. But after having meetings with multiple volunteer departments and talking to our stakeholders, one of the things that we didn't really take into consideration was there's a lot of volunteer departments that do no hazmat response in their areas. And we have tied the education incentive to 5 years from July 21 that they should have their hazmat operations. And looking back now, I mean, we're paying for the sins of our fathers. And I was sitting on this subcommittee back then also when we did this. And we were really focused on wanting everyone to be certified through our accredited agencies, but we didn't take into consideration what their actual departments respond to. And I think we put some benchmarks in there that just is not obtainable to a lot of those departments that we have in the state of Tennessee. So I think honestly, what we're looking at here is a complete streamline rewrite of Chapter 7 to where we look at seriously taking away those benchmarks. And one of the things that we discussed in that other subcommittee was the possibility of creating a Tennessee Volunteer Firefighter Certification that is issued by the commission office, but is not accredited through either IFSAC or Pro Board. And what that would do is that would basically say, yes, they completed their 16-hour or they're in their minimum 64. You know, we like to say 64 because that's what it's addressed, but we know that's actually a lot more hours that are involved, and we know 16 actually carries into 64. But I think, you know, putting a hazmat awareness piece instead of the operations and firefighter 1 piece in there, along with a live fire, because going back to these volunteer departments, you have a lot of people who may just be engineers or drivers of the equipment, and they will never go into an IDLH environment. And I think where we're at right now with doing the rewrite on this, and once again, this is my opinion, I think we need to really just go back and look at maybe just wiping the full rule out and rebuilding it from the foundation back up, because there's some other things that we need to look at too. For instance, volunteer departments don't have the luxury of being able to appoint a training officer, whereas on the career side, all career departments pretty much have that one person that is their training officer, and they have the time to be able to develop the curriculum for the following year, whereas the volunteers, they don't. And I want this to be fair across the board, where what we're doing on the volunteer side is also going to be replicated on the career side. So one of the ideas that was put out there was, for instance, the October 1st deadline for submissions for the following year. What would it look like if we wipe that away? So these are just some of the things that I want to go ahead and bring out right now. And I want to hear from the other subcommittee members at this time. Crickets?
Can you hear me? It's Commissioner Solomon.
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm traveling in Gulf Shores today, so my apologies. I agree with Commissioner Scott. I think that it would be great for us to, I mean, we need to be listening to our customers, and do a complete rewrite. And I agree totally with everything he said.
Commissioner Cobb, I agree as well. I think we can sit down and look at this and rewrite this and make it a better document for everybody involved.
Well, I'm going to take a quick different spin down a different road for just a minute, since we're starting over. So eventually we're going to go back to page 1 of the rules, as this subcommittee. And I'll caveat with this. I'm the old grumpy guy now, I've found out. For one thing, the commission, in a way, we've I'm going to say it based on our mission statement. We've lost our way and our integrity a little bit. I guess I should check. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the mission statement of the commission, right on the front page of the website. The commission will endeavor to raise the standards of firefighting personnel who engage its certification and training programs by enabling Tennessee firefighters to be better prepared through training courses, facilitating the skills and knowledge necessary to save lives and property, and to vigorously promote firefighter safety, efficiency, decorum, and ethical considerations throughout the certification process. We consume ourselves with this educational pay to the detriment of the rest of our mission. There's nothing in the mission statement about handing out money. I just want us to keep that in mind. That is not what we're established for, and it seems to consume us. All right, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. So yeah, we got to figure out how to get the volunteers more engaged in VEIP. I get that, but we spend 90% of our time on handing out money and to the detriment of the rest of our mission. That's just my take. Now, somebody else, you can all disagree with me, but I'm on the committee too, so I'm just throwing that out there because I thought about, we're talking about taking away the requirement if somebody passes away to give them money. Well, then let's just give money to everybody that goes through cancer treatment or takes vacation during in-service training. I want us to be careful here. We're not going to have any integrity left if all we do is hand out money. I'm talking about big picture, long-term effect of our decisions. So I just want to caveat. So, some things I may say no to, but I'm just one vote of 9. So I'm just throwing it out there so y'all understand my position.
Chairman Windrow, Commissioner Scott, I understand completely with the views. I think one of the things that we really need to look at, though, is the education incentive is basically, hey, you do the required amount of training, the minimum amount of training, right? That is prescribed by the commission, 40 hours for full-time or career and 30 for the volunteer. And basically it's training that they're already doing. And, at the end of the day, yes, it's a supplement. Great. Thank you to the state for recognizing us to doing training and for paying us. But I don't think that, I think we're looking at it in the wrong direction as far as we are a certifying agency. We are here to better the firefighters in the state of Tennessee, to make them better, right? Through the certification process. And I actually look at the education incentive as, hey, this is a sidebar of what the commission does. And actually it's not really part of what our true piece is, and that's certifying people. This is just like an add-on bonus, is how I'm viewing this. And, great, you're doing your training here. We're going to reward you for doing it. And it should be looked at separately than the actual certification processes itself. Yes, we do want to make sure that we have every firefighter that is eligible and that is available to be able to go through the certification process to achieve that. But I think, like you said, we do put a lot of focus on the education incentive and wanting to make sure that people are hitting the goals in order to be paid. But I don't think we need to really look at it, tying it to the actual certification process in itself. And that's just me. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, other commissioners?
Well, I don't disagree that we need to drop the hazmat out. And I was one that said that there probably needs to be a volunteer certification. I just don't want to completely dilute the rules to where there's no requirements anymore. I want to be real careful of that, because educational incentive was meant to incentivize firefighters to get certification. If we take away that original intent of, well, you don't really need to be certified, just be a good old boy and we'll give you the money. I'm just saying, let's guard against that. Again,
Right.
I'm not against getting rid of the hazmat and going 30 hours, and maybe we need to, like I say, we all know a CADIS is a pain in everybody's rear section. So what can we do to make it easier for the customers?
Well, and that's where that volunteer firefighter certification basically would replace that firefighter one
Yes.
requirement, right? And that way we're still, hey, we want you to get this certification, which would still require them to get their
Yes, sir.
minimum basic training
Right.
and also get that hazmat awareness component. So because I feel it's important, they may not be doing operations in hazmat, but they definitely need to be able to know how to use an ERG and be able to recognize a hazardous materials incident and how to begin the mitigation process for that. And I think, by having that volunteer firefighter certification replacing that firefighter one requirement, I think that's a huge step in the right direction. Because once again, we're still saying, hey, you can't just come in off the street and get the money. You're still going to have to put some skin in the game outside of the 30 hours of minimum training that's required for the volunteer side.
Well, then why even do, I mean, it's already hard enough for them to get to a test site in some places. So why not have test questions in the volunteer firefighter on hazmat awareness and in their practical? Why make them do 4 tests as well? Why have to take a hazmat awareness, practical hazmat awareness test, a written test or practical for volunteer firefighter and a volunteer firefighter test? Why not just have one, embed some of the hazmat awareness stuff in the basic volunteer firefighter certification so they don't have to take so many test sites? Let's go all the way and make it really easy.
Well, with the online portion that's available today, and granted, there's not internet in that covers the whole state of Tennessee, unfortunately. And there's a lot of areas that they may not have the ability to have internet service. But I mean, they can go on Tennessee Fire Online and they get their 1664. And then we also have TFACA that is offering those classes for free for the volunteers across this state. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're doing it in the county as a whole and not in specific departments. I could be wrong on that.
Well, so I think we all are in theory in agreement. So let's get back to Maribeth and Heather. And where do we want to pick up in this chapter? Do we want to start at the front of the chapter, the start of the rules, or where Maribeth has got her placeholder? Let's I guess for efficiency, we'll never get done. I think in theory we know what we want to do, so we've got to get to each rule to make those corrections.
I say let's move back to the very beginning of chapter 7.
So
Heather?
do you guys want to strike everything we did last time?
I think to be very fair and to go into the direction that we're actually looking at, I think that would be best. But that's me.
How much is there already been touched in 7?
This is what we did last time. Is for basically 3 sections.
But you're redlining the existing rule, not the one that takes effect July 1.
That's correct. But as we went through this process, we discussed what had been changed, and I'm pretty sure we coordinated it accordingly. But I have both versions up, so if there's a specific question, I can read to you guys what the red line should look like after it comes out of the Secretary of State's office, and then what you guys proposed last time, if that's helpful.
Well, luckily, I have not only the new rules with me, but also the old rules with me. So let's just start and go back through them. Because at this point, this is where we're going to look at making some of these other radical changes, if you will.
All right, so would you like me to pull up the rules as they currently stand, or the edits you guys made at the last committee meeting?
This is what I'm sorry, go on, David.
I'm gonna say, I mean, I'm like you, Bill. I've got the new ones coming out, so I think we can. Oh, why mine? Because obviously the first big change will be right at the beginning, but that's in 04. I'm a little ahead of myself. I don't know that one's going to change much more again.
So,
Nah. Heather may have some questions because she said it's hard for her to confirm some of these things. And
all
do
right,
we,
So
do we
we did
require
not,
DD 214 to do D? Let's just take D, for example.
what was your question, Chairman Woodrow?
How do we prove D? How do we know? Do we ask for their DD 214s? I don't think so.
I think that would have to be on the local agency.
well,
Chairman Windrow, so the things that we've struck through are things that when departments submit, these things are not submitted to us. So we do not have a way of verifying it other than the agencies filling out an attestation form stating that everything is correct and that
Okay.
everything is there. So um, these things are, like I said, they're not where we can verify, and so they're in here, but we have no way of checking to make sure that each one of these people have what they are supposed to.
Well, I mean, we have to have some rules out there. There'll be no rules. So, I mean, yeah, if the fire chief is signing that this person meets the minimum qualifications, then we are going on the honor system.
Right, but it becomes a a penalty of perjury, and obviously we're hoping that these people are honest and submitting correct information.
well, in the new rules that will be July 1st, there's actually caveats in there for any misinformation that was purposely done. We could actually take action on that if it's come to light. So their honor system, and if they happen to be found out that they're guilty of misinformation purposely, we can take action on it moving forward.
I think we can roll on down to 02,
Yeah.
right?
Now, Maribeth, remind me why we struck full-time.
We spent a while going back and forth about how to categorize part-time employees versus full-time versus volunteers. And the committee's ultimate decision was that if you were paid to be a firefighter, you should fall under category A.
Yeah, because actually in the new rules in a previous chapter, it actually goes down into breaking that down. Basically, a career firefighter is anyone who is employed full-time by a fire department, and then a volunteer is considered anyone who basically anyone else that is not in the full-time employment of a fire department. That's what's in the new rules. And I'm going back to look at for the correct verbiage on that.
What chapter are you looking at, Commissioner Scott?
That's what I want to say it's possibly in 2. because it actually breaks it down to, okay, actually, no, it's in chapter 1, number 19. A volunteer firefighter shall mean a duly appointed member of a fire department who is not employed in a full-time capacity with the department. Volunteer firefighters may receive life insurance, health insurance, workers' compensation insurance, length of service awards, pay per call or per hour, or similar compensation. So basically, anyone who's not employed as a full-time person in a fire department will fall under a volunteer designation.
So would you guys like to reverse the change that we made in the last rulemaking hearing relating to full-time?
I mean, because
I'm sorry.
we're
The
Yeah.
last committee meeting. Do we want to
Right.
take this out?
Because like I said, back in chapter 1, we pretty much said what a volunteer firefighter is there. So when we say full-time employee, because right now we're talking on the career side, that would be the full-time. So
Is that in chapter 1 or chapter 2 under
It's gonna-
definitions?
it's going to be in chapter 1, and it's number 19 in the new ones. I'm sorry, definitions, chapter 2.
That's what I was thinking. There's nothing
Yeah.
in chapter 1.
Yeah, chapter 2, 19.
Commissioner Scott, my rebuttal to that is for the part-time employees that are working at a full-time career department such as like Laverne or Shovable or places like that, they are not volunteers. Those individuals are in a paid status as a part-time employee. And so that
Correct.
was part of why I was fighting to have the verbiage of full-time removed, as we are eliminating or excluding those individuals from being able to get it. Now, I mean, if you're stating that they're a volunteer, now these departments are going to have to fill that out, accordingly, and it be different.
But once again, in that rule, we're stating or per hour. So a part-time person's being paid per hour. They're not paying you the salary. So, and then also other place in rule, it states that if they are receiving the education incentive at their full-time department, they're not eligible for it in their part-time. There's only one loophole that's in that coincides with this education incentive, and that's between law enforcement and fire. Whereas you could be a full-time police officer, get your education incentive through Toledo, and then be a volunteer firefighter and receive that as well. But you can't do that. You can't reverse that on the police side, where if you're a full-time firefighter and a volunteer police officer, you can't be eligible for Toledo's education incentive. But clearly right there in definitions number 19, it states that a volunteer firefighter is one who could be paid per hour and not in a full-time capacity.
And I think there's a couple of things in play there. It was to give the handful of part-timers that might not be a full-timer somewhere a path. It gives the nonprofit fire departments a path. It gives a path to more opportunity. And if they're not a full-time firefighter, it only requires them to get 30 hours.
Correct.
I think you want to be careful about giving the full amount to a non-full-time firefighter. I would see the Tennessee Professional Firefighters having heartburn with that as well.
Right.
And it makes sense. There's a stiffer requirement. The requirement to be firefighter 2 hazmat or ops certified to get the, I think you've got to keep that distinction, like Commissioner Scott's saying. And we left that, that's a very broad category now of volunteer firefighter.
Correct.
I think that was our intent. It wasn't to give the part-timers $800.
No.
They're not
No.
full-time firefighters. They're
No.
not held to the same standard. And it would be hard if you had a part-time firefighter that wasn't firefighter 2, they get nothing then. They don't meet the 36-month requirement.
So I think we need to leave full-time in there.
Yeah, because a part-timer shouldn't get the $800 if they're not firefighter 2 hazmat awareness and ops.
Correct.
Chair
you're putting a
Windrow,
bu-
how are they not held to the same standard though? If they're working for a paid department, these paid departments are not going to allow them to be employed unless they have those.
No, you'd be
Certifications.
surprised. There's no law. The only law that requires certification is salary incentive. You can hire somebody and they never get certified and they can be a firefighter if you as the AHJ sign off on it. The only requirement for certification is Chapter 7. There's no certification requirement to work for a fire department.
That's up to the AHJ, and that's where it should stay.
I mean, you've got chiefs coming into the state that are not certified, that are no longer eligible for salary supplement. That doesn't mean they're not qualified to do their job.
Josh has a question.
Can y'all hear me? It's kind of noisy in here.
Yes.
The other section that you might want to address there is there has been a big question on where full-time employees of nonprofit fire departments fit into. I think they have been covered under the volunteer section, but I think if you put it in the rules there to clarify that 2A county or political subdivision or nonprofit fire department as a full-time employee, I think that would bring a little bit of clarity to some ambiguity that we have right now that's caused some issues.
Well, to coincide with that, we reference in a lot of places inside our rules, specifically in Chapter 2, departments recognized under the Fire Department Recognition Act. So that's one of our catch-alls right there. And we reference that numerous places throughout all 7 chapters of the rules, that to be able to be eligible for any commission component, they have to be a member of a recognized fire department by the state.
Right, but you see, as 2A is worded right now, that would exclude any full-time employees of the nonprofit fire department. So the commission has been covering them under the volunteer provisions. And I think there's some question of whether or not, they have the authority to do that. But that's kind of been the catch-all. So, this would clarify that any full-time employees of, municipal, county, or nonprofit fire department would fall under that. Section A would be helpful.
But Josh, we can't go there. State law doesn't allow that. Not in the rule. We'd have to change the law.
Okay.
TCA says a member of a municipality. I mean, it's very clear. That's the whole reason we haven't been able to pay the volunteers that, like, I won't say a department. It's in the county northwest of downtown Nashville. Let's just leave it at that.
Right. Well, we've got probably 50 or 60 employees that fit that category right now, and we're paying them under the volunteer portion.
We are.
That's been my understanding.
It has been, and that was our semi loophole we could find without changing TCA.
Okay.
Now that may be a bigger battle down the road, is to get TCA changed. But I mean, we have the same thing with with the Whacking Huts, the Fort Campbell firefighters, the, there
Rural
are a lot.
metros, whatever.
Yeah, rural metro. You would be covering more than those handful of 501c3s that are out there as well. It would be a much larger pool. If you change the TCA is very restrictive right now. And Mary Beth may be able to correct me. I've been wrong many times before, so.
My understanding is that the TCA says you have to be a recognized fire department. Is that the discussion that the statute that you're referencing, Chairman Windrow?
Well, the Recognition Act, I don't have, the problem with TCA is you got to bring it up one little section at a time. If I had a book in front of me, it might be faster.
Do you want the TCA code number?
Well, I know the 424-102, 424-20212. I mean, I know the numbers. It's just, you only look at one at a time.
So under 201, the definition of a firefighter requires it to be a unit of government. Is that what you're referencing?
Right.
That's my interpretation as well.
It has to be government. And a 501c3 is an independent contractor for a government, unfortunately. Same as Rural Metro, same as Whacking Hut, same as Blue Oval, the other fire departments like that. They're not government. So that's why we have the problem with making 501c3 firefighters full-time firefighters. They're not technically a government entity. They're a contractor. They're serving pseudo for the government, but they're still not a governmental entity.
All right. We could spend the next 30 minutes on this. So on A, we're going to go ahead and unredline the full-time portion.
Yes.
All right, I'll mark that in my notes.
Before we do that, I was listening to this and something popped in my head. What about the departments that go from volunteer to part-time, then to career? Those part-time guys would have a chance to get the full 40 hours, $800 versus the 30 hours. Are we eliminating that?
I didn't follow, I'm sorry.
So if a department has part-time employees.
Correct, which would fall under the $600 pay.
So I understand, Commissioner Scott, what you're saying, that a lot of times firefighter A will work for Department 1 and then goes over and works at Department 2 as part-time. But we also have some departments where volunteers get bumped up to part-time first. And then if they work out, they'll hire them full-time.
Correct. So while they're sitting there in the volunteer and part-time phase, they would be in the $600 range until they meet their career portion, the full-time portion, which then they would be eligible for the $800 stipend, provided that within the 36 months after obtaining that full-time appointment, that they reach their firefighter 2 requirement. So they're able to still continue to receive the incentive from the volunteer all the way to the full-time. The only difference is once they get that appointment to full-time status, that's when they're now eligible for the $800 instead of the $600, provided that they're doing the 40 hours of service. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I was just stating that yes. I was just pointing out that some of those people might be eligible for the $800 if we didn't
Well,
force them to be a volunteer.
There's some
status.
other rules in play that really don't affect us, but I've played a lot of this. Under IRS, if you exceed the 30 hours a month, you're a full-time employee, and that agency is supposed to give you benefits, leave, insurance. So if an agency is overworking their part-timers, they're in violation of federal law already. We don't need to support that. You know, you're part-time or you're full-time under the Fair Labor Standard Act and under IRS rules. So we can't help what some departments, if they're out there working part-timers 120 hours a month, that's their fault. But as far as the standard goes, if they're still part-time, they're part-time.
Yeah, if their classification is part-time, then that's what they're gonna receive this benefit under is part-time, which would be the $600.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Is that Greg?
Yeah. Greg Ruthoff, Fayette County Fire. What stops a part-time employee from getting the full benefits, the $800, if they do the 40 hours? I mean, there's nothing that I've seen, and I may be wrong, but if a part-time employee does their 40 hours in service, there shouldn't be anything that stops him from getting 800 hours or
$800?
$800. I'm $800. I'm sorry.
But there is, because here in this rule, it clearly states that a full-time person on the career side would receive the 800, whereas anyone else outside of a full-time appointed employee would be eligible for 600. It
Right,
doesn't
I mean,
matter, and it doesn't matter how many hours of training they do, as long as they meet that minimum requirement.
I mean,
They could do 600 hours of training as a part-time or as a volunteer, but they're still only eligible for $600.
and I get that, but I mean, that just may be something that's hung out there. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm just asking a question.
Well, unfortunately, there's no step-up process as far as money, so we have two levels. We either have $600 or we have $800. And what differentiates that is between a full-time career person or a volunteer, part-time, paid per call, what have you. What the definition that we've already read earlier. And that's the only two options that are available. And so what we did here was we had the $800 that was already previously established for many years. And then back in 21, when the $600 was introduced for the volunteer side of things, it was, okay, well, career, you already had this side. So now let's catch everyone else that does not fall under the full-time capacity of a firefighter appointed by a jurisdiction to be able to have that 600.
And I think we're spending too much time on too small a percentage. I mean, like in Knowlesville, I have 25 part-timers, but they're all fully certified working somewhere else. So they're all getting $800. Most of them, I got to think most of the part-time firefighters out there in the state are just like EMS. They're working at multiple agencies on their days off. So
And that's what I have here in my department.
that's what I have. And I'm pretty sure Pleasant View has a heavy contingent of part-timers that are Metro and Ashland City and Knowlesville. So I think we got to keep this thing moving.
Yes. All right. So we're putting full-time back in. Let's now move to paragraph 1. Entry level is deleted. All right. So entry-level personnel in the new rule, 1A, it shall be mandatory for all qualified volunteer firefighters to become certified when eligible as the firefighter 1 level in order to become eligible for educational incentive pay. So Director Zimmerman, how hard is it for your office to issue a state of Tennessee certificate based on receiving the completed class certificates for your minimum basic training, 1664 live fire, as well as a hazmat awareness class, and to be able to issue that certification?
It shouldn't be difficult as long as, I mean, we build out exactly what we want it to look like and what requirements. And also, do you want a test or practical associated with that? I think if we, have clear-cut, concise guidelines as far as issuing that level of certification, I don't think it would be very difficult.
Well, like like Chairman Windrow stated earlier, if we take it just beyond, because each one of those classes, they do have to do a test, if you will, at the end of it. So they're already going through a testing process there. Is that something that we should look at incorporating as a commission test for a written test that would cover those 4 areas? Well, you're going to have the live fire. So if we have like a basic fireman test and it incorporates hazmat awareness questions inside that test, and then they perform a practical that coincides with all that, almost like a firefighter 1 practical, if you will, with an HMA component in there. Is that something that's feasible on your side in the commission office?
I have a question about the HMA. Are you wanting them to walk away with a HMA commission level IFSAC Pro Board certification from that test?
I mean, it's available, because if they're doing the coursework, if they do the approved HMA class, either through online, through TN Fire, or if it's taught in person through TEMA or what have you, and they're going to do a practical and written test that has that component in there. I mean, HMA test is 50 questions, and it's pretty much almost a full open book test, because you're using the ERG in order to do this test. It could be that benefit of, yes, they will walk away with a commission certification in HMA, because once again, all you have to do is take the class, do the practical, do the written, and you have the HMA accreditation. And we're still moving them in that direction. If they want to go ahead and then challenge their firefighter 1 later on, then they would have to do the HMO portion on their own and progress that way. But is that something that's feasible?
So I'm going to answer, but also our new accreditation manager, Greg Palmer, is on this call with us. And so he may be able to chime in and add to that. But if we were to award a IFSAC Pro Board HMA level certification out of this said Tennessee Volunteer Fire Certificate, we have to make sure that those questions are scored separately from the rest of the test.
Basically,
Greg?
if we do a 50-question basic fire test and a 50-question HMA test to complete a 100-question test, we're knocking out both birds with that one stone, correct?
To my understanding, yes, we could probably be able to do that. Greg, do you have anything to chime into that?
Yeah, the anytime we want to mess with the accredited certifications, all we have to do is just make sure that we're following the policy and procedures that are put in place for the state to be able to issue a certification. It doesn't necessarily differentiate between a volunteer or a paid firefighter. And it doesn't have to be a certain number of test questions either. So if it's kind of geared towards making it a little bit more practical for a volunteer, it doesn't have to be the same 50 question test. It can be a little bit smaller if that's what everybody decides to do.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was going to be my next point. There's nowhere in rule that states how many questions are supposed to be on a written test. It could be 10, it could be 1,000. So as long as it's rated at a 70 percentile.
That's correct. So Commissioner Scott, that's correct. However, there is something wrote in our policies and procedures about it being how many questions is on a test. And so that is something I'm going to be working through with Mara Beth. But that's something that I think the commission we need to make sure that y'all understand and are aware of that, per IFSAC and Pro Board, they do not dictate how many questions are on these tests.
Correct.
The thing with them is that we have to make sure that we have double the number of questions in our test bank that we are administering to these students. And so with some of these test banks, for the ones that have helped with test validation, I appreciate your help, but you probably saw that we got some test banks that were smaller than 200 questions. And so that is challenging on our part, because to meet that rule, that means that we have to write more questions. And so I think, obviously I'm kind of getting off track here, but that's something I think we need to look at
Well,
later on is.
Director,
And let's go back to our thought here, though. The numbers of volunteer firefighters is rapidly declining. Our goal is to rapidly increase it. We've got to keep this as simple as possible. If somebody wants HMA, they can pursue it. If they're trying to get a job, they can pursue that later. I think we should keep this, because this is not an accredited level. It's not going to affect the accreditation, because it's not going to be an accredited certification. Let's just have volunteer firefighter and keep it clean to get our numbers back up. And remember, Commission's been around 50 years. We didn't have HMA and HMO for career people until about 15 years ago. So why are we punching it on the volunteers right out of the gate? Let's get back to our mission of making the reasonable, getting the volunteer incentive to get participation up. Adding tests will not get that participation up.
So keeping it simple with just the class certificates in order to receive this certification, that we could replace the firefighter 1 component.
I think that would be the fast track fix. And then we're having rules meetings for the into infinity. We can always increase the requirements as we get the numbers up.
Correct.
This is Commissioner Solomon. I've been trying to chime in. I'm sorry. My opinion is if we do, there's going to be another test bank and trying to get, I guess you would have to have that validated. And what Commissioner Scott just said, I kind of agree with, is we just base that on completion of the courses, whether it's a team HMA, TFACA, and then also the 64 and live burn.
Okay. Mary Beth, these rules are going to be a long time coming before they're actually going to be able to do that. Is it possible for us to go ahead now and put in there, and maybe parentheses, for us to come back when it comes to the rule hearing time, where we have these pieces in place, and just replace that firefighter 1 component with the Tennessee Volunteer Firefighter Certification?
Yeah, I'll make a note, and as you guys develop what you want that to look like, we can always basically draft on a blank slate what we want that rule to look like. But for now, what I'll do is highlight it to say that we might replace the firefighter 1 with a Tennessee volunteer. You said Tennessee volunteer certification?
Tennessee Volunteer Firefighter Certification.
Okay.
That way, that's a certificate that they'll receive, that they've completed the minimum basic training required to obtain this.
Hey, so for 16 and 64, you already have to take a test to complete the class, right?
That's what we're saying. So it's just class certificates. You send in 4 class certificates, which is going to be your 16, your 64, your live fire, and your HMA class certificates. You'll be issued this certification, this certificate.
Okay.
So back to, what about the departments that don't even have an ERG on their trucks? Why are we, I think we've got to keep this simple for the 7,000 volunteer fire departments or firefighters.
Well, the beauty of that is they can obtain free ERGs through their local EMAs. Plus, I have an ERG on my iPad, my telephone, my MDT. So I mean, it's not like it's not available. It's free.
Yeah, but you're
It could
not
be
hanging limb, Tennessee.
true. Because I did mention that earlier too, where there's a lot of places without internet, didn't I?
Commissioner Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
We do have something in the chat here. Mr. Broughton, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If not, I apologize. He just said, I'd like to say if you want a commission test for HMA and firefighter 1 for volunteers, make it a 25 question HMA and a 50 question for firefighter 1. Recommendation.
Once again, the test question numbers goes back to commission policy. And the beauty about policy is that's something that could be developed in the office. They present it to the commission for us to approve, and that moves forward. We don't have to go through rulemaking and everything else involved with this process. Policies are much easier to change than it is for the rules.
Mr. Evans, did you have something?
Yes, ma'am. And I was just going to add, I don't think the HMA is too much of a burden as long as we're not requiring the commission certification or any other commission test. I think meeting the minimum training standards in HMA is very realistic for our guys that are having trouble getting there now. I was going to kind of add to that, since it's in the same section, we've had a lot of discussion over the 36-month, and does that start when the firefighter starts or when they start training, or what if they switch departments or whatever? And so when I was looking at this session, I was looking at two options that I would encourage y'all to consider. One would be, because we're making the requirements very doable now, if we follow along this course, just to say that, they don't qualify for the training supplement until they meet that standard. That's a pretty easy standard now to meet within the first year. Or most of these people that we're talking about that have been on the department for a long time that probably can't meet the current standard will be able to meet the standard already under this. So to just say you have to have it in order to qualify, period. The other option, if you leave it at like a 36-month window, would be to say, must reach the standard within their third year of participating in the program. And so that way, if they've been a firefighter for 20 years and have never done any organized training, and we get them to start coming to training, then we have 3 years for them to qualify, to get them through everything. If they haven't wanted to do that before, or if they, serve 2 years at one department and then move to another volunteer department. I think if we just said across the board, if y'all are wanting to keep the 36-month option, that by your third year of participating in the program, that could be consecutively or non-consecutively, that could be with any number of departments, but by your third year participating in the program, you must meet this standard.
Josh, no offense, but I actually was thinking, because we're just looking for class certificates for this certification, 36 months is way too long. They should be able to have this within 24 months, and that's only if they have to wait on a TEMA class. But like I said, if they have the option to be able to do it on their phones, because everyone has a smartphone today, very few people still have a flip phone. They could actually do a TN Fire online class for HMA on their phone, sitting, at home or wherever. So,
right.
In all honesty, I think, I wouldn't even be opposed to a 12-month, in the first 12 months to have this minimum basic training completed in order to qualify.
Yeah, I agree. If you just said that you had to have this training before you qualify, period, not only does it simplify it quite a bit, but it also takes out the abuse of, where you've got a rural fire chief that might add 4 or 5 people to the roster for 2 or 3 years to get the supplement.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
if you just require it in order to get it to begin with, I think most people who want to get it either already have it or can get it within the first year. And so if you take out that waiting period in the long term, it's going to make it a lot simpler on everybody.
Agreed.
I agree 100% because that will make it a whole lot easier for Miss Tina when she's trying to, verify and make sure that everybody has stuff. Because it is very difficult for us to go back and try to figure out how many years that each one of these individuals has participated because we do not currently have a database. We have a Excel spreadsheet that all of this is kept in, and then having to go back and forth to Akata. So I think that would, to your point, Josh, I think that would simplify it for us greatly here in the office as well.
I saw Coordinator Ratley mention something about EMA. Todd, I'm gonna challenge you to call TEMA today and see how easy it is for you to receive an ERG book for free from TEMA Nashville. You up for that challenge?
The reason
You're breaking up. You're in that hole.
I'm in the hole. How about now?
Okay.
The reason I mentioned that is because I've actually come across at least 3, Van Buren, Marshall County, and their contact information on Acatus isn't even accurate. So all I was saying was they may not have availability. If you said reach out to the local EMA, well, there's probably not even anybody there or staffed, or they don't even have an accurate phone number to reach them. So that's why I bring that up. I know some of the bigger areas, obviously, they're probably better organized, but some of these outlying counties are not.
Well, will you take my challenge and call TEMA today and see if you can receive a free ERG book from Nashville?
Sure, I will.
Thank you.
Hey, I got another one. So what if you have counties that only do a 16 and 64 once a year? You're putting a timeline on them to do it quicker.
No, there's no timeline. They just won't be eligible to receive this education incentive until they receive that Tennessee Volunteer Firefighter certification.
Yeah, but there you go. You're taking it away from them again.
But I would add that under the current rules, nobody that doesn't already have this is going to qualify for it going forward. So there's not anybody that's going to lose it that wouldn't have lost it under the current rules. But it is going to make it much easier for the new people to get it going forward.
And I agree with Josh because we hit the 3rd year rule this year. So everybody that qualified for it this year has exactly what we're talking about mandating to even be able to participate in the first place. So you are right, Josh, that nobody would be excluded. So it would only affect people going forward.
Well, in the new rules that are coming out, the dates are 21 and it's 60 months from that date. So that would be next July would be the cutoff for that firefighter 1 on the volunteer side.
And also, would that firefighter certification coming from volunteer firefighter certification hold any weight to if you wanted to move on to firefighter 2? Say they moved up and stuff like that.
No, because it's not firefighter 1. But basically what they did was they did the prereqs in order for them to be able to continue testing forward to get their fire 1 and fire 2, provided that they go ahead and take their HMA commission test, which then would lead them into taking their 40-hour operations class and test that for their firefighter 1. So it's basically the ground steps for them to move forward with that because they're getting their basic training completed in order to be able to keep progressing forward if that's what they choose to do. So, all right. What do we have next?
So are we deciding that we're going to slide in the HMA into this program, or we're going to make them test separately?
Make them test separately. So it's just going to be a HMA class completion.
Yes, I can agree with that. That gets them started in the system and taking their first test, and I like that.
Now, I think we're saying two different things. We're saying they don't have to take the commission tests to get the volunteer certification.
Correct.
Yes, I don't think that's what Schrock's saying.
No, that's not what I understood. So they just have to take the class?
The class.
The
Just
class
the
is.
class. Okay, so to answer the question before, if they want to get firefighter 1, they will now have to go back, take the HMA,
Yeah.
HMO, and then firefighter 1.
Yes, they would
Yes.
have to take the commission test as well as the operations class in order to test for operations.
Correct.
Again, this is strictly a volunteer cert for the guy or girl that's never going to be a firefighter at career department.
Correct. But it's also laying the groundwork for them to be able to progress forward with commission testing if that's what they choose to do at a later time.
Next, Mary Beth.
So 1A, we have struck that CPR piece out in the new rule.
Yeah, that's going to be out in the new rule. So then the next thing we would be looking at is y'all's choice at the last subcommittee meeting to delete this paragraph 7.
Correct. That's gone.
I do think we skipped around a little bit, obviously paragraphs 1 through 6 in that same rule. Is that something we want to readdress, or are we good?
Well, I think with what you have on screen currently with the number 2, the volunteer firefighter must be compliant with minimum basic standard training hours pursuant to by the end of the calendar year in which the volunteer reaches. Then we just talked about taking away the deadline and making it, they will be eligible for the incentive once they receive their certificate.
Yeah, I have that in the comments over here on the side.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we get that language exactly right before we go type in anything official.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'll take that back to the drawing board and bring you guys something to chew on at the next meeting.
All right. So,
Can I comment on your note there about the exempt counties?
Yes, go ahead.
You know, what we've done in some other rules and some other legislation is when we reference 424.112, we only reference, you know, the subsections that spell out the minimum training standards. And so that it doesn't include any of the exemptions, just to make that clear.
Josh, is that your loophole to get around that?
Yeah, I mean, or just to spell out what we're going to require and not reference 424.112. But I think we all hope 424.112 at some time will be updated and not have any exemptions. So
That would be the dream.
yeah, so referencing it is not a bad thing. But it's, you know, it's got 5 pages of exemptions right now. So.
Maybe that's something in the next legislative session I've always wanted to attack it.
Me too.
So this is the section 7 that or part 7 that we had deleted last time. Do you guys see any reason to go through 1 through 6 on this part 2?
So what I would like to see is to completely take out any confusion. Let's mirror some things, with the exception of the firefighter 2 requirement for career side. Okay, because like you see in number 3, it talks about the volunteer firefighter must have, right?
Yeah.
So I
break
mean,
down what
that-
you're saying there.
yeah, so that would be completely struck out. And if we go up to 2, once you get done with that, I'm still looking at a July 1st, 2021. So are we still talking about, so we're still talking about volunteers that?
I think this is y'all's edit on rule 2. Let's see, we took out July 1st, 2021 in the initial meeting.
Yeah, because basically we're just wiping that away and saying the Tennessee volunteer firefighter, once they accomplish that, then they're eligible. So what, Mary Beth, what you have on screen right now, is that old or?
This document is what Heather put in the chat, the 2022 rules, not the ones that are going to effect in 2024.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have those as well, if we want to reference them.
Okay. No. So like 2A1 is wiped. If we look at it at paragraph 2, I'm sorry, 2A2, we're saying 1664. That's what section are we in? I'm sorry. Scroll up just a little bit.
7014.
All right, entry level personnel. But this is where it goes back to what we just got done spending 30 minutes talking about. So if you'll make a side note and just reference the Tennessee Volunteers Fire Certificate, and that way we know what we're talking about there for as far as the volunteer piece goes with this. So when we go to 3, we're talking about qualified personnel who are separated from the fire service for a period greater than 60 months, then re-enter. We talk about this quite a bit over the years when we talk about the rules. Nowhere in this country does a IFSAC or Pro Board certification expire anywhere.
Well, depends. FDSOA, you expire on your safety officers, but that's organizationally, that's not pro board.
Right.
But there is talk in the new accreditation manual, there was a talk of expiring certs with the standards. Where it's at right now.
So
Greg,
I
did
know
you
that
mention that?
I'm back. I know that there's talk at the technical committee level of plugging into the NFPA standards kind of a requirement for recertification. It's been discussed probably for 3 to 5 years, give or take now. But there are states out there that do have requirements to recertify. North Carolina being one of them for their certified fire investigator certifications. They have to recertify every 5 years. So it's a thing. It's being discussed. And if I had to guess what the technical committee at the NFPA level, what their kind of mode of operation is they'll slide it into an appendix 1 cycle, and then they'll roll it up into the actual JPR requirements the next cycle.
Okay, I sit on the 1010 committee, technical committee, and I have not seen any of that yet. So I'll keep everyone abreast of that when I see it come across.
Can I ask a question?
The floor is yours, Josh.
You know, I think there's a healthy amount of discussion to have on whether or not that should be in our rules at all. You know, you've got people that leave the fire service for a few years and then come back for a whole, you know, variety of good reasons. And I really think it's up to the AHJ to decide whether or not that person is qualified or needs to go back and do some remedial training. But I guess regardless of where you stand on that issue, I don't think that rule makes sense to be in our EIP section. At the very least, I would, you know, ask y'all to consider deleting that from the EIP rules. And if you think it's an imperative rule to keep, you know, maybe to put that somewhere else.
I agree with you, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because once again, the actual certificate of pro board in IFSAC does not expire. And because we rely so much on training officers or departments to go ahead and take people out of the RMS and have an end date on it, it's almost impossible for the commission office to be able to accurately track that, because if you have a person that has gone out of the fire service that had an ACADIS account and they've been out for 10 years, and once they populate back into ACADIS, guess what? All of their certifications pop right back up and say never expire.
And I have a problem with that, because if you've been out more than 10 years, standards do change. And when they change, they're not up to date on stuff. But even though it does populate back, to me, that's not fair. I mean, you have people coming in state and getting reciprocity, and people in state, you know, just get, I'm not going to say what I was thinking, but you know what I mean.
This should be something that's on the AHJ, whether or not they feel that the person needs to have remedial, or they're good to go. And the liability should be placed on the AHJ at that point.
But remember, we're in the educational incentive. The incentive is that they're educated. If they've not done any training in 5 to 10 years, why are we rewarding that? This is the educational incentive section.
Okay.
Look at the other side. There's the other side of the coin. It's educational incentive. The incentive is that they're maintaining ongoing training, and they haven't had any in 10 years. So we give them the money, and it's the same as the lady that took 400 hours of training last year at NFA and TFACA and Tennessee training. It's not a fair, that's not apples to apples.
So
Well,
is this a rule that, David, you feel that we should keep in there? I mean, because I'm trying to look at the logical portion of it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from a what is the intent of educational incentive? That they get education. If they haven't been getting any training for 10 years, they shouldn't get the incentive.
But that's where it goes back to, they're still going to have to do the 40 hours in order to qualify to receive it for that year.
Yeah,
They
but
can't just walk in the door.
Post. I mean, unfortunately, Post is under Commerce and Insurance as well, and that this is their rule as well. We're for one of those rare occasions, we're mirroring the police officers. which is not a bad thing. If technology's changing as fast as, if somebody left the fire service 3 years ago, they don't know what you're talking about with a Tesla or a Leaf or a Volt. There's been a big change with car firefighting in the last 3 years.
Correct. But at the end of the day, a person walking in the door today, they would still have to complete what the EIP plan is for that department in order to get it. Like Josh said, this should be something that we put in another place, in another chapter of rule, because for education, they have to meet the minimum requirements of what the program is, as well as the certifications to be eligible.
I would agree with that. I mean, this is a year-to-year thing. I could get all my training this year, I get the money. Next year, if I don't get the money. But the next year I could. I'm not arguing that we may not need this rule, but not in this section.
And I
And
agree
Heather's-
with your statement.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Heather's the one that has to track this, so her office, so it's probably more on her.
Yeah,
Director, your
I
thoughts?
agree. I agree. I think it needs to go. And again, back to y'all's point, if you feel strongly it needs to live somewhere else, that's fine. But as far as an EIP, I mean, back to Commissioner Scott's statement a second ago, these people can't just walk in off the street and get this money. Like, they are going to have to meet the requirements for that section, whether they're career or volunteer, along with their required 30 or 40 hours. So we're not just going to be handing them money, even if they've been out of the service for, if they've been out for 10 years and they come back in this year and they do their 40 or 30 hours along with, and they meet their minimal standards, then absolutely. But again, I don't think this needs to live in this section. We are at the mercy of these departments to keep their records accurate. So.
All right.
Is that a strike for the complete thing here? Oh, yeah, she got deleted in its entirety.
It's Commissioner Solomon. I would agree. We move that to another section and maybe discuss that further once we talk about re-entering the certification process. We could even look at letting the fire chief or their designee sign a paper, to attest that there's still compliant.
Yeah. There's too many times, there's too many instances where the HJ is relying on us to put the hammer down because they don't want to. Right? When it comes to people coming back into the service or whatnot. So I definitely think that this is something that we need to have, but somewhere else, not here. Because once again, we want to keep this simple. We want to clarify and we want to streamline this. And that's just, us regurgitating a rule and spitting it back out in the same place where it really doesn't need to be.
All right, I have a different recommendation. That's an hour and a half. Do we want to take 5 minutes and come back at 10:30?
I'm good with that.
Well, Heather's in charge technically.
Likewise, I agree.
All right, 10:30. We're going to start at 10:30. Everybody might not be listening, but all right, because I know there's a bunch of coffee drinkers out there in the mornings. Number 4, good. Good question on, do we need an attestation form? I would guess not if there's no requirement, right?
No, I wouldn't think so.
No, I mean, her question's good, but yeah, what would the form ask if there's no requirement? Number 4, the director came from a organization that asks fire safety questions, so maybe this one would be for you. Or 4 and 5.
Is there any way that we can merge that and maybe build that into something up where it talks about career or, um, because I mean, obviously we're giving these people the, ability to get education incentive pay. Is it really necessary to have them broke out? Or can we loop them into, or we're talking about career firefighters? I mean, I'm open to thoughts on that.
Well, the thing you got to look at is for a fire safety inspector, one of the requirements, and I actually, it may have been even struck at this point because it's been so many years ago that I got my inspector, was the HMA component. But there's a lot of municipalities where their fire inspectors only do just that. And so they do attend multiple classes because they have to, in order to maintain their licensure for the state, they have to do 36 over 3 years. And with them being tied to the CRR component also in a lot of departments, seriously, I mean, is it really required for say a 60-year-old person who's a fire inspector for, Moose Nuts, Tennessee, to have to get his firefighter 2 if he's got to go ahead and still maintain these classes and he participates, but he doesn't do suppression activities?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying have like a, I don't know, like a bullet point under career firefighters that it's, kind of a standalone, but we don't have to go into such grave detail about each one, but, list them as an option of being able to get that, and if we still have to spell it out a little bit, then that's fine. But I mean, is it really necessary to have these 2 large paragraphs for these individuals specifically?
Well, let me ask you this. Because the education's incentive is derived for certification and what have you, should they even be eligible for the education incentive if all they do is fire inspection?
Now that will be a discussion for the commission members because
David,
I've
your
been-
thought?
Yeah, I've been going to commission meetings for 20 years, well, 30 years now almost. Yeah, that was a fight to get that in here this way because they are part of the fire department. And really, it's mostly, let's be honest, it's the big departments that have that separate bureau, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville,
Yeah.
Memphis.
Right.
And so you're probably talking about 40 people. And
Right.
so I don't think it's hurting us, and I just say we leave it. Now, what she's asking, maybe under B, there's 1, 2, 3. Here's the 3 things for career fire. These are the career categories that qualify for a salary supplement. Inspectors, public life safety educators. Now, there's a few departments scattered out there, the smaller departments. I know Dixon has a life safety educator position. Spring Hill has one. So there are a few of those out there. They are out there. It was just to not alienate them. And the people fought for a long time to get those into the educational incentive program.
All right. So maybe condense it down to fire safety inspectors and public life safety educators, or fire prevention bureau, and condense it into 1 paragraph with the same outcome.
I think that's what the director's asking for.
yes.
There are a few volunteer departments that have certified fire and life safety educators. So you might, leave it to where it would be a qualifying option for career or volunteers. There's not going to be many that have that, but
Pleasant View
Right.
does.
yeah, Pleasant View does.
All right. Let's consolidate that because it's almost saying the same thing. except for one. Yeah, they're both saying the same thing.
Are both of those requiring a commission certification? I can't tell from just reading it. So,
By completing certifications as, Yeah.
Yes.
yes, six, I think stays.
Is there enough clarity for the volunteer that joins today? We did away with that 2021 date, right? So that's
Yeah.
should be much clearer now. If somebody joins the department today, that's their date.
yeah, and if you're gonna eliminate the 36-month period and just say they have to meet the minimum standard to qualify for the pay, then you could delete 6 as well.
Well, not for the paid guy.
No, we need to leave 6 in there, period, because it should be from the date they joined in order to meet the requirements.
Okay.
You could take out the volunteered, but
Oh, back to Josh's point though, if you're gonna take out for the volunteers where they have to have those certifications classes before they're ever even eligible, that's a null and void point. Now, if you're gonna leave in the 36 months for the career guys, then yes, but for the volunteers, it would be a null and void point.
you could strike that volunteered as a firefighter
Yeah,
respectively, because that's going to apply to the career people.
correct.
And would it disregard? Never mind.
Mary Beth, take respectively out as well.
Seven only talks about career.
Correct. But what we have to do is look at the rule that's referenced down at the bottom of that paragraph. Did we make any changes to those pieces that needs to be updated?
Oh, this 0704.
Yeah.
That's a lawyer thing to check that we didn't contradict the earlier rule.
Because God knows we can do that. And
Lord
we've done
knows
it.
we've done it. Yeah, we can make a lawyer's life miserable.
No kidding. All right, so requirements for in-service training programs. Yep. Appointment of training coordinator. So once again, talking about the appointment of training coordinator.
So are we far enough along in the VEIP committee to say that we're not going to have a submitted program? We're going to let them submit 30 hours?
Yes, and matter of fact, I actually would like to see that replicated on the career side too. Whereas, well, and let me tell you my case in point. Right now, Tina doesn't go back and she doesn't verify class dates of when this class took place, right? She just looks to see that the class is on the list. And so when she's doing her internal audits going through each piece, because that piece is not being looked at, why do we have an October 1st deadline? Because, you know, we want to streamline this for the departments, but also for the commission office as well. And so if we turned around and submitted at the end of the year, our class roster of these are the classes that were done on these dates. And here's the rosters for all these classes. Here you go. Good luck. Godspeed. It streamlines it. Because at that point too, there's a lot of other pieces that come into play here, such as we scheduled this class for this date, but we had to move it. Now we have to contact the commission office to let them know we moved this class. Whereas if at the end of the year, we just go ahead and say, here's all of our classes, they meet the minimum hour requirement for which have you. And then here's all the class rosters and testing instruments that took place with this class. Here you go. And that December 1st or December 31st deadline would still be in play of, yes, or March 1st deadline. Here's all our classes for last year. This is what the minimum requirements were. We met them, and here's the rosters and such to go with it.
Well, isn't the rule currently, as long as it doesn't move more than 30 days, you don't have to notify the commission?
Correct.
The only downside I see of landmine is the backside, the audit trail. Let's say somebody did 26 hours of online training and submitted everybody, and then we go, oh, that doesn't count. I mean, we're the gatekeeper. I'm just thinking of landmines. If somebody submits a program after the year's over and 26 hours of it were online training and we only allow 20, so nobody now gets salary supplement, we could have cut that off with the October date. I'm not saying that I would hope that the training officer wouldn't let that happen. I'm just thinking of what could happen. Or they do 36 hours of EMS training and we only allow 20 of that, or what. I'm just using examples. The October deadline is to help the departments not make those mistakes.
But where we have it in rule where it states this, then obviously they broke the rule. I guess I'm looking at putting more responsibility on the AHJ.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're the ones that have to go and do the audit after the fact. I just won't make it too hard on us either.
Right. Josh, what's your question?
Yeah, they'd have to submit their program in December, I guess, because when we go to look at it, we need to know, we can't look at let's take worst case scenario. Well, let's just take Murfreesboro, 250. And we got to look at their whole training record for the year. They could have, if they're a go-getter, they should have 120 entries, 2 hours a day, according to ISO. So they might have 200 entries on their training record. We got to sift through to make sure they got 40 hours that met our rules. Now you're saying put that on us, on the training officer, to pull out the 10 4-hour classes that they took that were fire training, that weren't online, that weren't what do we call it? Mundane routine, hose testing, ladder testing kind of things.
Right.
Sir Isaac Newton says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I don't want an unintended consequence that we find after the fact.
But also on, say, Toledo and EMS side, this is what they're doing.
That's true. Well, and again, it's on the person because, we're supposed to have for an EMT, 6 hours of child or pediatric emergencies. You can't have all adult. The onus is on the individual. Yeah.
Right. So, but like I said, both Toledo and EMS, they're just submitting their documented training for the year, and that's what's sufficing. They're not having to go ahead and do
pre-submission.
A free submission. And I see Josh has another question or statement.
Yeah, so two things that I had written down that I thought would be really helpful would be, one to say department, because I think a large part of this could be deleted or simplified, but I would add that a department may submit their training program to the commission office to make sure it meets the requirements. that way, any department that has a question about it or wants feedback on their program can still, submit it to get kind of pre-approval or to make sure it meets the requirements, but they're not required to do so. The second point would be to add a new point that says, the commission may adopt a training requirement that must be part of the department's annual training plan. So that if 2 years from now, there's a, enormous issue that pops up that the commission thinks is critical, that it's included in everybody's annual in-service training, that y'all could add that, on a one-time basis or on an ongoing basis, but without going back and amending the rules to do so. So those were 2 points that I was would ask y'all to consider. I think the big thing for us is, as you talked about, eliminating the annual training submission plan as much as possible, eliminating substitution forms. And, today we still have to submit a substitution form on a class, for example, that we took at TFACA or that already shows in ACADIS, eliminating any of that extra paperwork on things that are already there to be verified in ACADIS. Would take a lot of work off the volunteer departments and the commission staff.
That's where I was going with this. Thank you, Josh.
I'd like to speak on this if I can. I'm a big advocate for removing this because, again, I was thumbing through some data just this past week, and I stumbled upon just for this year, for the 6,000 career firefighters that we have paid out so far, 20% of those were substitutions. And of the combo departments, 35% of those were substitutions. And so that's a heavy lift for Tina to have to go in and, sift through all those. Also, too, with these volunteer departments, you're asking these guys and gals to create programs. And, these individuals are not career firefighters, more than likely don't even have fire instructor 1, let alone firefighter 1. So you're asking a huge, asking them a huge responsibility to build these programs out for these departments and submit them when they are probably already doing the training and doing more training than that we are seeing. And so by allowing them to do the training and put it into ACADIS, and then at the end of the year, let us verify that they did the 30 hours or the 40 hours, I think it'll be a much cleaner, much smoother process in getting these guys and gals paid out. But again, I would love to see this completely gone. I mean, if you want to leave some things in there, if you want to leave in the requirement for 2 hours of VKF, which, I mean, that meets a statute.
I think the requirement should still stay because, hey, here's the outline of what your program should look like. But what we need to do is look at taking away that October 1st deadline and saying, here, you submit your courses, but per rule, this is what your course should look like, or your courses should follow, your EIP plan should follow. So I think we still need to have that in place.
Yes, and as far as your audit, that would make it easy because, I mean, if we're going in and we're looking, individuals got 60 to 100 hours, we're going to be looking for those components that y'all have marked as requirements right off the get-go. And then from there, obviously if they've got 60 to 100 hours, then they've more than met the 30 or 40 hour requirements. So I think it would actually make your audit process as a whole lot easier as well.
I really like this idea. I think it will help departments across the state.
One of the biggest complaints I hear quite a bit about is the whole substitution piece. And how I get around that is if I know I have a class that at least 2 or 3 people are going to be attending, I turn around and I drop that class into my EIP program just so I don't have to do the substitutions because they are cumbersome. And if we go with this route, that's going to eliminate any need for a substitution outside of maybe a college class. But if they're already doing the training, that's part of their training program for that year, they may not even need that substitution at that point.
Well, are we gonna leave the easy paths in, like anybody that takes a commission test? That's such an easy substitution. They wouldn't have to have any training proof.
Right.
It's two pieces of paper, a substitution form and a IFSAC cert.
Right. You know, in a couple years ago, we actually talked about this actually in the full commission, whereas for a commission certificate, we would just have to do the substitution form and we wouldn't have to include the certificate because it's already in ACADIS. But today we're still having to submit all of the documentation.
But if they took the class, it's already in ACADIS. So if we're verifying that they've got the training, what's the point of sitting in the substitution? I mean, that's the whole point of trying to do away with this, is so that we don't have to do that paperwork.
Well, you're gonna have to have some sort of paper trail for the comptroller. I mean, we're never gonna get away from a paper trail.
But
I
the
mean,
paper trail is in ACADIS. It's already there. If they took the course and it was logged, it's there. The paper trail is there.
So going down the road, what does that look like when we walk into, we'll just, like I say, we'll stick with Murfreesboro, 250 people. We're auditing 25 or 30 firefighters. What do we get? Does Nicole hand me let's say we pick 3 people. She goes into Vector or whatever and prints those 30 people, because they're not going to have the same classes anymore. We're going to have to look a little harder to make sure that it was a fire class, or if this was the year Murfreesboro, because there's 2 things by law, Vanessa K. Free and domestic violence, that have to be every 36 months or every 3 years. So I've got to look at those 30 names. If that's Murfreesboro's year, that class has that training has to be in the program. So I'm on the other side of the fence from experience. I think the audit's going to be a little harder. I think the upfront work for the office and for the departments is going to be easier.
How do you envision it being harder as far as the audit? I mean, if
Well,
you're looking for
right now,
VKF,
I look at a roster, and the 9 names I picked did it. Now, those 9 people may have done 9 different classes. So I'm gonna have to look at the individual to make sure they did fire training, because they're not all gonna be one class. They're just gonna do whatever gets them to 40 hours of fire training. Doesn't mean it's gonna be the same class. Some of them may be in the same class, but the odds are against it. I mean, we've got small departments that submit 15 substitutions.
But that's what we're already doing anyways. Like we have to go through line by line, looking at each individual class to see if it corresponds. I mean,
Well,
we're
now we've
already
got to look
doing
at
that.
each individual when we do the audit, not the department. We're going to look at individuals. Again, I think it's easier. I'm not disagreeing. I just think about what does an audit look like in that world?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we already look at the individual and all their courses to
No,
make
we just
sure.
look at a roster. Everybody's on the same roster almost, especially a small department. So we look at one piece of paper. Now I've got to look at the 30 different people, not a roster. I got to look at 30 rosters a day for each class. I'm just thinking out loud, and I may be wrong. I think it's still going to be easier on the front end. I think it's going to be easier on the commission office. I think the audits may cause us a little more problem.
You know, I'm a 50-50 on that, David. And the only reason why is because so many departments, and I'm saying so many are using LMS systems to where they're tracking this in their Vector or their fire engineering or whatever LMS first do, whatever.
Right.
So with, like, for instance, in my audit, when they came and audited me this year, I pulled my Vector Solutions up. All right, who's the first name? And all of my stuff was right there with the attachments of the rosters and the testing instruments. My audit literally took 5 minutes in my department. It literally was 5 minutes because so many departments today are utilizing electronic means and digital records that it makes it so much easier for our auditing purposes. So, you know, we may have that one department where it is all paper and we will have to go that line by line like what you're talking about. But I think with the vast majority of departments today that are utilizing the electronic means for their documentation, it's going to be a much smoother and quicker audit that actually will take place.
But you're talking the 100 career departments. There's 700 volunteer departments that may not have a computer.
But
So
how many
that,
volunteer departments do you audit?
well, that's 10%, right? That'd be a Heather question, the
No, no,
director.
no, no, no. How many in Middle Tennessee? How many volunteer departments did you audit in the
Oh,
past 3 years?
None, but we're hoping that number goes up.
Well, that's just it. We don't audit the volunteer departments. They're auditing them in-house. We're only auditing the career departments.
Yeah. But now for the office, you're going to take away the program. So now they're going to go line by line.
That's what they already do.
That's
Well-
exact. Yes, Tina already does that, and again, it would make it a whole lot easier for us, to have to just decipher through and find just a couple things, and then make sure that the total hour is the 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending upon if it's career volunteer.
Well, I mean, obviously, everybody else, the EMS and Post have already gone away from this. So we're the archaic one.
It's time to get into the new century.
Can I ask a quick question concerning this? Would they still have to submit their training program when they submit for their rosters for the pay supplement?
Well, of course.
Yeah, so we would still have making sure that they meet the requirements we set forth in this rule. So we would still have the training program. So as far as the audit, I don't know. I can't get my mind wrapped around where it would increase or make it difficult, because we would still have the training program submitted at the end versus October 1st.
Well,
Am I
but there's not gonna, if we go pure like EMS or Post, there's not a training program. There's individuals did 40 hours of training. There is no program anymore.
Correct. It would just be the
Hours.
the training rosters and records loaded into each individual's Acatus account. Like it would be at the conclusion of their training, the training officer would load up that information into each individual's account. And so when we would do the audits, we would pull up that and then also whatever records they have and compare them instead of the actual program itself.
You know what? No, let's think about this. Let's still keep the program, but instead of having that way, there's still something that's organized. And this is the program that we're deriving our training EIP from. And this is what we submitted for the year, our training program for the year per EIP, instead of just having it whatever we completed. So that way there is still that component of organization as far as what's being completed. Make sense? Because I think, David, that's kind of what you were going towards as well.
Well, I mean,
And Travis, I think that's what your question was.
Yeah, because what my vision would be, when they submit the roster for who all meets for the EIP, you could check mark whether they met it by 40 hours class, or check mark they met it by a certification obtained or substitution letter. And when they submit that, it all submits as a packet with their training program.
Yeah, so
Uploaded in Acatus, yes.
So they'll still put together a program. They'll still submit a program. They just don't have to submit it October 1st. They will just submit it as one big package with everything.
I'm still not sure what the advantage is in that, though, Commissioner. Because, your large departments are still going to have, most of their people taking the classes together. The online classes are going to be there electronically. They're all going to have to be loaded into Acatus by the department. So, kind of have a summary of what they have done is really not going to be helpful, I don't think, to them or to you guys at the end of the day. I think it's just going to be some additional paperwork.
Actually, Josh, it will, because it will keep it clean, meaning instead of me looking at 150 different training events that took place this year, this is what we're submitting as our program for last year. This is what we want to count towards the EIP. Okay. That way it's clear and concise, instead of us going back and looking at like I said, 120 different training events across the department, because they may have had 1 hour here or 1 hour there. And so it's a cleaner piece. So that way the EIP program is still there. It's just, you don't have to submit it October 1st. You just submit it at the end of the year that you did the training. And that way, here's the package that I'm submitting for this.
Commissioner Scott, I mean, in our EIP meetings, or I'm sorry, our VEIP sub meetings, I mean, that's one of their major complaints are these programs.
Right. Well, it's semantics at this point, because what we do in training for the year, we can call it a program. Okay. Or we could just go ahead and say it's documented training, but it's still a part of a program. It's a training program. This is what we did. But what we're saying is, no, we don't want to see this October 1st. So whatever you have planned for next year, whatever classes you want to go ahead and incorporate or have added or have accounted for your training, you just put it into your program synopsis and say, here it is. This is what we want. And that's a plan.
I think it goes against our make it better. We're saying a volunteer does 30 hours of training, they're done. There's no program, there's no substitution for whatever their 30 hours is their training. Just like if I do my 20-hour renewal for EMS, I submit my certificates, at the end of the third year, second year, whatever it is. I thought we wanted to go easier, not, I don't, because so-and-so goes to FDIC, they turn that in as their 30 hours of training, and so-and-so goes to EFO for inspection practices, that's their 30 or 40 hours. I thought the intent was that whatever they did was good. We didn't want to see because you're still going to wind up with substitution forms if you have a program. Because they didn't attend that class. So when they don't attend that class, now they got to have a substitution form.
That puts more work back on that training officer and then us having to look at it. I think the way it was originally presented was the best for the firefighters in the state, but it may add more work for us.
That's what I think.
So back at the original, where whatever documented training is what we're going to accept.
Well, it's what we did the first year with VEIP. You send in 30 hours, that's good. And that's probably what we're going to want to, I'm just saying, it'll be much easier overall. There'll be a little more work for those of us doing audits. I can't see any way around it.
Well, I'm 1,000% with whatever documented training. Let's roll with it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to throw some other options because, David, I know how you like to look at the other side of the coin as well. So I was throwing those other pieces out there.
Yeah, no, I think we'll learn. But I mean, we're only talking a handful of, in a department of 70, you might draw 7 guys. So any, whether it's first due, whoever, firehouse, you can always print off 10 people's training records. And you could even, I wouldn't say pre-draw, that's not a good idea, but it may just take a few minutes more at each audit. But in the long run, it's going to make everybody happy if you do away with these programs.
Right.
And we're probably not too far away technologically from you being able to do your career department audits electronically as well. It's almost everything that you would need to view in person is going to be online at some point.
Yeah, we
Right.
don't do, like, our department and the two I left don't have vector solutions, but they do have First Do, which prints out you can say, I need the training record for John, Joe, and Susie. You
Bingo.
know, and bingo, print it.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what I was getting at the beginning. But like I said, I know how you like to see the other side of the coin, so that's why I kind of.
Yeah,
took
no,
a-
I mean, I just think there'll be a little more work on the audits, but overall, there'll be less work in the long run
Correct.
and happier customers.
So I think we should keep the parameters of the training in there. But
Right.
let's do away with the pre-submission.
Commissioner
Agreed.
Solomon, I'm in favor of that. I would agree. As far as the audits, you know, if it does create a little more work, I'm good with that. I'm good with creating work for myself as long as our customers are happy and it makes it easier for our folks. And when I say easier, I'm meaning more streamlined.
Well, I
Bingo.
mean, even EMS, if you get pulled for an audit, you just resubmit all your stuff again as an individual. It's not even a department thing. It's individually. I'm not thinking we go that far, but
So just to clarify for Marbeth on here, pretty much what we're looking at right here, we are going to take out completely and leave in the portion above it where it's talking about the domestic violence, the post-traumatic stress, the hazard materials, things of that nature. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So everything for 4, like, if you can scroll back up, Marbeth, just to make sure that I'm keep going. Maybe it's down below it then.
No,
well, hold on though. It's with the program
There it
word's
is.
still up there.
There it goes. That's what.
yeah. So B, we would keep that stuff. Let's see here. Right above B4, a department may not use same in-service training. Yeah, we want to keep that. But as far as
Why would you keep that? If they're not submitting a
The
program, why would we
program.
keep that?
so we want to go ahead and teach ladders year after year after year after year.
Well, hopefully they shouldn't be, but I mean, we're not controlling what
you
they're
said
teaching.
hopefully they shouldn't be. But if we don't have it there saying, hey, as part of the parameter, then it gives them the opportunity.
I don't think we're policing it right now, though.
No, I mean, we're not.
But we got to
I
go
weigh
back
in
up
on
to
that?
the top. You're right. We need to come back to the very beginning of this section because there's a lot of things that would have to be deleted. So we got to get rid of that whole program word. It's just training. There's 40 hours of training for career and 30 for volunteer. That's about all we care about.
So do you guys want to go line by line, or do you want me to just kind of take it, workshop it, and bring it back to you
I
guys?
think you're lucky here, or you can pick a section. Everywhere it says program, you're going to delete it because it's not a program anymore. It's just training. There's 40 hours of training. Like down there where it says test, you can have 1 hour as part of your training program. No, you can have 1 hour as part of your training, as your in-service training, if they so submit it that way.
You could probably delete that line completely, though. Now, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's true.
That's ours, too, yeah. Last night or yesterday, whenever it was, we voted on that.
What line do you want to delete completely? Please repeat that.
I was referencing a department may count 1 hour for testing as part of their in-service training program.
Yeah, it's not needed.
All right, I'm happy to take that to the drawing board and just bring back what I think you guys are asking for, and we can
Yeah,
review it.
I mean, everywhere like in B where it says instructor-led programs, you can just say instructor-led training should be 2 hours. I mean, it's pretty simple. Online courses, it already says it, are 1 hour. It's already correct. I think it's that word program that we're trying to break from the tradition and from the vernacular. Because this is going to be a radical change. We want everybody to have 40 hours of fire training with the caveat of some of those classes are required by law, domestic violence, Vanessa K. Free, SIDS, those things that are in law. Now, my question to my fellow commissioners, how in the world do we keep up with that? Is that on Tina?
David, repeat your question, please, sir.
So there are certain requirements in law, Vanessa K. Free, domestic violence, and SIDS. Those are law that are required every 3rd year for every firefighter in Tennessee to participate in. How do we track that they did it?
How do we track it now?
Well, they put it in the
Yeah.
program.
Right? But
Well,
what
of course,
does
we're
that
not
mean?
verifying it that that it hadn't been 5 years since they had it. So maybe
That-
that's on
yeah.
the AHJ again.
That's my point. There's so many things that we have in play that we're not really tracking. You know, I had a peer review last year where I got called out for not having a class, but it's a class I do every other year. And it was a domestic violence, and because I have a rotation where this year I'll do domestic violence, SIDS, CISM. Next year I do CPR, bloodborne, whatever. And I rotate those back and forth in my program. And I had got called out and I had to explain, hey, it's because we did it last year. But as us doing audits, do we actually go in and ask the question, well, I don't see domestic violence. When was it done last?
Right. I think as far as this B with these, the commission requires the following minimum training. All those listed there where you've got the SIDS and post-traumatic stress and domestic violence, all that right there. I think that needs some cleaning up if you're going to leave it in there, because I get questions periodically about, like, for two there, domestic violence training and SIDS, is that 4 hours of each one? Is that 2 of one? Is that, what is that? Like, I think if you're going to leave that in there, you need to clean it up so that it makes more sense, because this every 3 years rotation, I think that causes some confusion as well. So make it clean and precise of exactly what you're asking for. So that way, when we are having to look at it here in the office, we know exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for VKF every single year. We're looking for domestic violence every single year. So instead of every 3 years, because we can't keep track of that.
Isn't hazmat struck in the new rule?
Hazmat, you said taken completely out?
I think it is, isn't it?
If we're
I
looking
don't
at
think so.
the one that says hazardous materials is still in there.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's number 3. Or
Took out the
I.
cap on the hours.
No, we took the cap off. We used to have a cap on there, and then we took it out for the volunteers because if they wanted to do a HMO class, then they could submit for the full amount because the number was so limited. I wanted to say it was like 6 hours or 16 hours of hazmat was what the cap previously was. And we took that back out in 21.
My problem with it is it says all training must contain this. And again, there are departments that do no hazmat. Because used to, we said you had to have 8 hours every year, and then we finally dropped that. And then we said you had a maximum of 16, we dropped that. But we gotta remember, there's departments that have no hazmat capability, so why is it required?
Right,
Especially for a volunteer department.
right. I mean, for us,
Why are we requiring it?
we do a minimum of 8 hours every year for us, and it's only because I have hazmat technicians that we need
But
to have those
you
8
do
hours.
it, you do it because of OSHA
FEMA.
120.
Yeah,
1910 CFR, the Code of Federal
Right.
Regulations, 1910-120. You're doing that. A volunteer department could care less about that.
May I make a suggestion as
Mhm.
far as I mean, obviously talking about this. So to meet some of those TCA codes, take and put it where obviously we want the departments to be able to train and do whatever, but put in a 2 hour every year require 2 hours of EKF, every year require 2 hours of domestic violence, every year for 2 of SIDS and 2 for their dusted samples. And then after that, the sky's the limit. Let them train on whatever they want. That's 4 classes that we have to check and verify that they make sure that they meet. And we've also helped them achieve meeting the TCA codes that are required for their departments, and we're giving them credit for them. That's my 2 cents. I mean, food for thought.
But that's requiring them to do it every year. We only have to do it every 3 years.
Where did the 3 years come from in the first place?
TCA.
But that creates so much confusion.
Um,
Do I do post-traumatic stress? Or I mean, I hear that question quite often. And then also too, y'all got several things on the same line. That domestic violence and SIDS. Do I do 4 hours of one? Do I do 4 hours of the other one? Do I do 2? Do I do 3? Like what? There's no clarity to it.
So that we just put something in there that says these 3 classes must be taught on a rotation at a minimum.
Yeah, but
You
how do we
just have
check it?
3. Well, again,
We can't.
So I had
can't.
a thought, because it was mentioned, we were talking about before how it was going to be electronic and you could pull those. Can we just submit to a department that they send us a roster, and ahead of time we say, all right, these 7 people we're pulling, I need to see their records for the past 3 years. We're not looking at anything other than these classes for those 3 years. Did they have them? Is that a possibility?
If these 3 things are statutory, would it make any sense to the commissioners to just reference that statute, like training hours must be in compliance with, and then these 3 specific statutes? Or would that confuse AHJs more than we already have?
Makes them have to chase another document.
I guess you could ask y'all yourself, is it the commission's job to police that, I mean, if they're not doing their Vanessa K requirements, is that something y'all should be policing? Or obviously they're putting themselves at a significant liability. Is it beneficial? Or you could still just add a line, like I mentioned, that said the commission, may adopt annual requirements that shall be a part of all training plans. And then year to year, y'all could say, this class has got to be a part of your training program, or one of these 3 classes has got to be a part of your training program. But it could be adopted by the commission instead of in rule.
but it's already in rule of part of the curriculum requirements.
Right. But I'm not sure if there's a reason for those to be in there, though.
I thought we discussed keeping the requirements of the training in there and doing away with the other.
Well, I don't have a preference either way, other than to say I think it's hard to enforce, and I hope any department that's doing adequate training is including those things anyway.
How many classes are there? 1, 2.
I don't
Can
think
we put them all?
I don't think the CISD is in the code as a required class.
Can we put them on as
But
these
I think
classes?
that's part of the dust and sample stuff.
But that doesn't apply to volunteers.
It's for all firefighters, I believe.
Can we put certain classes will be taught on even numbered years and the other classes are taught on odd number years? And that takes away all the confusion.
Well, I just pulled up the state law. TCA 558194 requires Vanessa K free every year for 2 hours.
Well, that's
Correct.
an easy one then. So
That's an easy one. I'm trying to pull up the laws right now.
So I can speak on the dust and samples because I've been talking with that gentleman, because the part of that does fall on the commission keeping up with the courses, but there is nothing in statute that talks about how long that class has to be. It just, that program has to be submitted to us, approved, and we have to have record of it. But they have to meet 4 critical points within that program, but nowhere does it speak on how long the program has to be. So throwing a 2 hour out there is just kind of a nice even number.
but Heather, doesn't that only apply to career?
That I can't speak on, Josh. I don't know if it's career or if it's open to volunteer, but I do know that the commission is a part of that as far as housing the program. But if it's just career or volunteer, I don't know.
I know there's not any of the benefits of the Dust and Samples Act that apply to volunteers. So I would assume the other requirements don't, but I could be wrong about them.
I do know that to be qualified for it, they have to have a approved program, and they have to show where the person has participated and received that training.
So really, it's not even required for career departments unless they want to participate in the reimbursement program, right?
To be eligible for the grant, yes. And so by putting this in here, we're kind of helping them to have achieved that.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way. Because we never want anyone to lose a firefighter, but when that happens, we'd like to be able to offer them assistance.
Absolutely.
Touching on the hazardous materials, can we just place in there hazardous materials at a minimum of awareness level?
I'm back to with David. Why is this even in here when we have departments that don't even operate at this level at all? It has doing hazmat period.
Because they very well could roll up onto a situation and need the education to recognize it and not commit to working it.
Not disagreeing, but speaking from experience, that going over the ERG every single year, that's beating a dead horse.
Yeah, because we are going to require them to have HMA in order to qualify. Correct.
I could say the same thing about Vanessa K.
True.
I get the same training every year.
But that's in statute, though. There's a state law that says we have to. There's nothing in the state law that says we have to do the hazardous material.
So why do we have it? If let's not have things in there that doesn't make sense. If it's not something that's statutory, and we have departments that aren't going to be doing it, if they choose to do it on their own, fantastic. But why do we have it as a requirement?
Well, and they'll have to have it in order to qualify initially. So, but if you delete it, then it wouldn't be required on a regular basis.
You have those departments that are going to do it because they have to do it for other entities. So that's on them. And if they want to include it in their training, fantastic. But for us to go ahead and put that in there saying, hey, you're required to at least do 4 hours of hazmat or 2 hours, whatever it may be. I think that should be something left up to the AHJ, whether or not they're doing it. And if they do, great, they can go ahead and submit it. But I don't think we should have it as a requirement. Because it's going against what we said at the beginning, which is there's a lot of volunteer departments that have zero hazmat response. And I think that should be just something that should be left up to the AHJ on whether or not they're submitting and they're doing themselves. No rebuttal?
I understand what you're saying. I'm just, I think it's just one of those situations where it doesn't happen very often. And if we have that education in there,
Right.
it may save somebody.
Yeah,
but I'm
listen,
good with whatever the body goes with.
yeah, they can submit it for training. That's fine. But I don't think we should have it as a requirement, because then at that point, we're putting a stipulation that, hey, even though you don't run hazmat, you still have to do the class. And they may only run on, car accidents. Who knows? But you see what I'm saying?
But those car accidents very well may have hazmat in them.
I agree. But for it to be a requirement, if they do it, they do it. If they don't, I think we should really just focus on statutory as far as what's truly required outside of whatever stipulations we put in there. And, hazmat would be a stipulation, but I think that, to streamline this and make it easy, I think we're in the weeds on this. And I think, let's just keep it clean. And once again, if the AHJ decides that they're going to do hazmat, they can submit it. They can submit whatever they want for hazmat. If they want to do an 80-hour hazmat class, rock on. But I mean, I think that it should be policed by AHJ because they know what their requirements are.
Right. So is the firefighter health and safety a statutory requirement?
No, that would be our stipulation. And that's what I was saying. We have some stipulations in there. Health and safety, that goes with NFPA 1500.
So how can we have? Are we going to say we're going to make them take this class because we feel like it's necessary, but we're not going to make them take other classes we feel like it's necessary?
Well, because once again, it goes back to they may have zero hazmat response capabilities, or once again, they may use the police canary piece. Let the police officer get close and watch him fall out and say, okay, guys, this is bad. We're leaving. I mean, that's why in that volunteer piece, it was important that we had that HMA component. So at least they knew how to recognize a hazardous materials event.
Steve Cross posted, looked like something from OSHA. I was thinking that, but OSHA would not apply to volunteers, would it?
It applies across the board as an employment or as a job function.
I haven't seen any class though that's been submitted to me for substitution or part of somebody's plan that would not meet that requirement of 4 hours of firefighter health and safety. I mean, 99% of every class out there would technically meet that requirement.
Right, if it falls in there. So I mean, it's not like it's a specific class or 1 or 3 or 5 different classes that they can choose from to meet this requirement. Pretty much every class that we do has to deal with either safety or health on the fire ground, or in a simple ladder class. it's going to be firefighter safety because here's the safe way to go ahead and deploy a ladder. So, I mean, it's going to fall within that range. So honestly, it's a line that's being filled that is a common sense piece. So does it really need to be there? Not really, because 99% of the classes we do either fall within that health or safety range, but it's listed there. So do we strike it or do we keep it? All right, we'll keep it.
So we want to keep HMA, or we want to keep fire, health, and safety.
I'll go striking both then. Just to clean it up. If other jurisdictions require.
Josh, we can't hear you.
That was short, Commissioner Cobb.
I was gonna say, just go ahead and strike them both. If other entities require some of these classes, then AHJ will just have to comply with that entity.
And I've been looking at the TCAs and what they do or don't require. There's no requirement for CISD. I'm not saying we don't require one. There's no, obviously hazmat applies, CFR 1910-120 applies to those that have either an operational, either technicians or operations level trained and equipped personnel that respond to mitigate. That's where the requirement, because it also requires medical surveillance. I mean, there's a lot of other requirements if you're a hazmat responder. If you're not, those requirements are not bound on you. Just because you respond to a scene that has hazmat doesn't make you a hazmat responder. It means you just go, oh, I'm not touching that. So we're done. Now, a couple other laws, the SIDS law, it leaves us a lot of vagueness. It says all in section C under 68-1-1102, all emergency medical technicians and professional firefighters shall receive training on the handling cases of sudden SIDS as part of their basic and continuing training requirements. Doesn't say any frequency, it just says you will do it on a continuing basis. Does not say that for domestic violence. Or for PTSD. It says there's no ongoing requirements. That's something the commission implemented to try to force people to talk about a subject that was taboo for a long time in the fire service.
Right. But the PTSD piece is what's falling back into place with dust and samples.
But dust and samples doesn't require any training.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Not
If you want to participate.
Yeah, if you want to be able to fall under having the opportunity to have the grant funding that's available for it, you'll have to be able to show documented proof that you have been doing the classes to coincide with it. Because it's a huge expense, and for what they're willing to pay, it's basically us helping them meet that obligation for that grant.
But it's still optional for career and
Correct.
does not apply to volunteers. I mean, really the only one of these that directly relates to us and is an annual requirement in the code is Vanessa K. If I understood David correctly.
Yes, it's there.
Yeah,
2 hours.
Yep.
Doesn't mean, you don't even have to drive. You don't have to do EVOC. You have to do Vanessa K free.
Right. So do you think there would be support for dropping everything else in that section? And just saying they're, must do 2 hours a year that meet the requirements of Vanessa K Free Act?
Josh, in our TCA codes, there is something about domestic violence training, but it doesn't specify the frequency of it. But there is something under there about domestic violence as well. So
Gotcha.
so here's the thing. We
Well,
can,
domestic violence is required for firefighter 1 certification only. I found the law.
we can be more stringent, we just can't be less stringent. And so I think if we have it for the career side that, yes, they have to have it, then I think it should only be good. What's good for the goose is good for the gander on that. So if we're required to have domestic violence, I think everyone should have domestic violence because it's important for them to be able to recognize it, as well as PTSD, because for so many years, we were so afraid to talk about it. And now we see where we're losing firefighters daily because of PTSD, not only leaving the job, but also taking their own lives. And it's something that we need the firefighter mental health, we need to be able to keep, no matter if it's a professional or volunteer, we need to keep that in the forefront of, hey, it's okay to talk about this because you need to be able to recognize.
I agree with you, Bill. And I'll actually tie back in. I know we talked about striking firefighter health and safety. That all ties in together, you know. So I agree, Bill. I think we ought to look and maybe discuss this further, but I understand trying to clean that up. And I would agree it needs to be cleaned up, but I think we need to keep the health and safety and PTSD in there. And one last thing, I hate to run, but I'm going to get back to vacation here, so I'm going to have to step away. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks, Travis. You too. Be safe.
thank you, sir.
Just to kind of simplify it a little bit, if you really got away from the rotation language and just said, you had to have at least two hours each year on that included firefighter mental health or domestic violence training or SIDS training, and just left it at that. Do you think that would accomplish what y'all are wanting to accomplish and encouraging it, but not having to sort out each year which one they did?
I think if we just kept the time frame in there, and if we go with the most stringent time frame, well, no, because the most stringent time frame is going to be the Vanessa K Free, which is on the annual. But if we had the window of, on the other pieces, if we have that within a, either a 24-month window, or I think 36 is just too long, because we're not talking about a lot of classes, and if we're alternating them over a 24-month period, I think that's going to meet what we're wanting to do here.
But
I
again, I
think
think,
Oh, go ahead, David.
well, I think we're overstepping because the law didn't say the commission had to enforce this.
Right.
We're waiting on the AHJ. And again, I've done at least 50 audits. I've never checked this to see that they're doing it. I mean, let's make the policy match what we're doing. Who's checking to see if they had SIDS in the last 3 years? I've done probably the most audits on here, and I've never checked that ever. It just wasn't on my checklist.
Right.
So we're not enforcing it. So why do we have it in rule?
My question exactly.
I've never checked to see if they do a safety class, because most of us do a safety class. Any training officer worth their salt has some form, because OSHA 1910-134 requires annual air pack training. We're not putting that in there. OSHA 1910-146 requires annual training with your tripod. We don't have that in there. There's a lot of things that are mandatory that we don't require as the commission. Now, it would be nice to give them some guidance, but can't check it.
Right. I think Gunny had a question or a comment. What was that?
Gunny, you out there?
Yeah, so traditionally in the past, going back several fire commissioners, it was checked to ensure yet the critical incident stress management, SIDS, and all that was part of the program. It has never been enforced yet that every firefighter actually completed it. It's always been confirmed that it was in the program, but since 2012, it's never been confirmed yet every firefighter in an organization completed said training. Only thing it was confirmed was that they completed the required 40 and now 30 hours for volunteers. But if you're going to insist yet it's in there, pick the classes and just put them on a 3-year rotation and say yet this year, every fire department in the state of Tennessee shall teach SIDS. Next year, every fire department in the state of Tennessee shall teach critical incident stress management / PTSD. And that way, it's able to actually be verified, checked, and confirmed who participated in it. If you're going to mandate yet every firefighter taking part of the program, that it's a prerequisite.
And that coincides with what Commissioner Cobb was saying. If we did it on an even and odd year rotation of this class is on this year, these classes on that year, that can be feasible.
I would agree with that, because the 3 years, that's gonna be difficult. But if we set it up every other year, odd, even, whatnot, I think that'll be a whole lot easier for us to manage here in the office.
Yeah, I mean, because
But again,
the reality of it is we. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm gonna say, the law doesn't require the commission to be the enforcement agency on this. It actually puts it on the firefighter. It's not a salary supplement requirement in the laws. I think we're overreaching. I think we're overreaching personally. Now, I'm all for all this training. Don't get me wrong. Because some departments won't do it if we don't mandate it, but we've got to be able to track it if we're going to mandate it.
I think we're helping our customers if we do. And then we can, on the even year, there's 2 classes. An odd year, there's just the 1 class. We can make it.
And every year it's Vanessa K free.
Correct.
So that already gets them, let's just say we require 4 hours every other year. So, and 2 hours. So 6 hours of their 40 are already going to be claimed, so to speak, already filled in for them. I mean, we do have the carrot and the stick, so to speak.
I think that's a good idea. Let's roll with it.
From Josh's side, is that reasonable for the volunteers?
Yeah, I think so, just because they're all on the fire training online. I think the enforcement or keeping up with it is still going to be a little bit, if we start denying a department because they don't have one of those, y'all are going to hear about it. But I think I would probably still word it is, at least 2 hours every year in one of these 3 programs. And we're not going to have any way to know if they do that same program every year, but we're highlighting the importance of it, and hopefully they're smart enough to rotate through them. Something like that.
The SIDS, the only approved program in the state, is run by MTSU. So it's going to be the same program every time.
Well, we do SIDS through TN Fire Training.
Do you? Because
I've taken
MTSU was tasked by law to be the developer of that. It's kind of weird, but
We do the same one every single year on TN fire training, and I've about got it memorized at this point, but it's not particularly helpful. The
Right.
videos are from the 1980s.
So do we still want to keep hazmat out of this, or do we want hazmat in on one of these years?
Leave it out.
I'll tell you out. Because if an organization is running hazmat, they have to meet the 1910-120 requirements. Medical surveillance, training, proper equipment. I mean, there's a lot goes with it when you say you're a hazmat ops or technician level organization under OSHA. And even a lot of us have started farming that out, and we pay HEPACO to be our response agency. We just keep them on retainer.
Do we want firefighter health and safety to be every year, or do we want that to alternate as well?
I mean, every class has a health and safety component, or it should have. I don't think that's very burdensome.
I think we were talking about striking that, weren't we? Because of everything that we do encompasses that. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood that.
No, that's what I said.
Okay. Air Force Form 1085 was a training form, and every last line, it was just already typed in, safety was stressed. Let's see. Three's gone away in the new one anyways, right? The CPR requirement,
Yes.
that's not in the new rules.
No.
Where are we at on the routine function stuff? Because we're not checking it per se. Oop, screen changed. Somebody's messing with me. C under there is courses taught by the include routine functions.
So that is in the 2024 rules. We did not.
It
take
is.
out. Yeah.
It just won't, we'll just take out, you've already highlighted program to take out. Because if it's a rookie school, let's just say, I don't know, well, Franklin, Murfreesboro, Northeast Tennessee is running their own rookie school. It's not, while it might be a routine function, it's not for a applicant or a recruit that's in training. If he's never seen a piece of fire hose, it still counts. I think it just means that not everybody should get credit for that in the whole department. Is that accurate? Some of you others chime in.
I think it's accurate.
Yeah, I think if they're running a rookie school, it's just, well, they're gonna have 440 hours, so it won't really matter anyways, but
That
I'm not saying
rule, that rule was in place to prevent us from counting truck checkoffs and
right,
other simple maintenance, yet we're not truly training evolutions
right.
as commission training. That's the
Yeah.
whole reason that rule exists.
Yeah, and that's fine, because somebody would. It's the way they whine about doing hose testing every year.
Also, with C, the portion where it says approved by the commission, commissioners, does anything that reads with that phrase from here on out in this chapter need to be marked or struck through? Because we're not doing approved programs
Right.
anymore.
Right, probably strike it.
Agreed.
So I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but it's down here later. Will we continue to have it almost has to disappear. Currently we have a test instrument to ask questions over their training. Well, what if Department X has members that did 35 different trainings? Will we be generating tests? And I may be getting ahead of myself. Will we be generating a test going forward for these in-service classes? But we're not to that section yet, so let's don't muddy the waters. That's on down in here. I'm gonna put that on the healing wall for right now.
And did we finish the end of the section above where we just spent a lot of time on, like the bottom of the page above that? I think a lot of that can be struck. I'm not sure if we talked about it or not.
Back up on page 5.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
So I guess all that's going to pretty much be struck. I guess that's what the note there says.
And what I'll do is I'll get that cleaned up and bring something proposed to you guys to edit and provide feedback.
Okay. We didn't really talk about 2 and 3, but I guess all of that pretty much would be struck as well.
Yeah, because they're not gonna submit
what I'm
dates
thinking.
anymore.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a moot point because,
There's no program.
correct.
What about in 2 above? I thought we'd gotten rid of those dates in the new version anyways.
I'm sorry, where are you referencing this?
And 1 right above it, we did away with the dates, right, in the new version.
Let's see.
Well, there's not gonna be a submission.
I was saying
Correct.
this whole page pretty much needs to be just struck. So
Yeah.
Yeah, the 2024 rules say October 1st and December 31st, but they take out they don't have a year. It just says of the current calendar. Looks like the same. So we can take that out of this version.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to say something about what, the vision of what the training we anticipate for the salaries or educational incentives. So I don't know that some part of A doesn't remain. The 30 days wouldn't be there. The curriculum, I mean, we could say the fire commission encourages firefighters to do safety and high risk, low frequency event. I think we do need to say something out there. Because if we come back for an audit and go, well, we're not approving that, they're going to say, well, why not are you not approving that? I think we got to be careful here. We can't go all the way loosey-goosey. And I know that doesn't make any sense. And I don't think we can answer this question today, but I think there's something to Joshua. There will be something in 4A when we do this. I think we encourage them to train on current trends or high threat event. I think there'll be something there to give them some guidance.
Right.
And that's something maybe I can work on offline, I can, the gift of gab to that. We could ask AI. I mean, that's one I can ask ChatGPT what should be there, I think there's something there. I think we just don't delete everything.
I agree. And again, if legal would allow y'all to the commission to add from time to time guidelines or requirements for that year's program, that would allow you to kind of tailor it down the road as you need to.
Right, because we don't know what we don't know yet.
Right.
who would have talked about battery storage or data centers 5 years ago even?
Right.
Well, in the policy and procedures document that Heather and I are kind of starting to work through is a much more easy to change document. So if the commission has suggestions as to how this should look at a department, and we want it to be a little more, like you said, loosey goosey and not in rule, that policy or procedures document, we might be able to kind of say the commission highly recommends this. We'd have to check with our legal
Right.
counsel and
Like in 4A, you could say, occasionally the Tennessee legislature passes rules about training. Those may need to be incorporated down there. You leave it open, but you acknowledge it. Like, right now, TCA 55-8-194, no fire department would ever look at that, or 68-1-1102 on SIDS. We wouldn't look at those, but we need to acknowledge that they exist and may exist as soon as the next legislative session. You know, the whole thing with school shootings unleashed a flurry of activity. No actual training requirements, but it could have.
And when the state passes a new law, we do then get emergency rulemaking authority. So that is something that we as a commission can stay up to date on as well. And if we do have to come in as a response to a state law for rule promulgation, that is one of the ways under the statute we can do emergency rules.
Yeah. But I think the other thing this is going to make us do is we're going to look closer at these laws, because like domestic violence, what I saw in the TCA is only required for firefighter 1 certification. There's no ongoing requirement. Although I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying we've got to be careful. We don't want to, as my old HR director said, don't paint yourself in a corner you can't get out of. And rules paints us in corners sometimes.
Very much so.
Unintended consequences. I'll do some diving into this section 4 before our next meeting.
Yeah.
All right, so it's high noon. How long do we really envision doing this today? I saw she put 7 hours. I was hoping not 7 hours, and to be realistic. Actually, I have a meeting at 1.
I was gonna say I put it far out just in case we ended up on a roll, but y'all make the call as to when y'all want to call it.
And the other thing we talked about in person alternating. I know I'm just before I forget, I know I'm with Travis next month on that day. I'm taking my 17 kids and grandkids I'll be on the beach then.
So why don't we look at scheduling the next one and then calling it for today?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm just trying to find my calendar now. The next meeting, technically by what we set at the meeting in Gatlinburg, would be June 12th. We said the second Thursday of the month.
Yeah.
And I won't be as gracious as he was and probably get online. Well, that's supposed to be an in-person meeting. That's why I'm asking. I mean, and again, we can't always all be 100%. I'm not that presumptuous. I mean, if we want to just keep that date and meet, it'll keep us consistent. We keep rolling forward. Whoever can be there will be there.
Why don't we look at June 5th?
Good with that date. And we can do it right here in the conference. I've got a large conference room in my building, or there's a nice coffee shop as part of the complex. I mean, we can have a good Middle Tennessee location.
But it still would be available for Teams.
That's up to
Correct.
Heather.
Yes, all meetings will be Teams. So
Available. Okay.
there will always be a Teams available option going forward.
All right. So then the only other question, Commissioner Copper, are you good with the 5th?
Yes.
All right. How about Director and also Laura?
I'm good with it.
I'm definitely
Yes,
good
sir.
with it. I wrote it down.
Yes, sir.
Let's go ahead and set the next subcommittee meeting for June 5th. Are we going to do 9 a.m. at where, David?
Like I said, we can do it right here. I'm at the Cool Springs and I-65 exit, so it's pretty convenient.
Okay.
725, I'll send the address out.
Okay.
Because we might do it in one of the we're in a 3-building complex and we have 8 conference rooms. So some of them are on the first floor. They're real convenient next to the coffee shop. So something like that, maybe.
Okay.
David, as far as internet accessibility, as for our teams, what are the options there? Are they pretty good? I mean,
Yeah, they're all
that's
pretty
always
good.
something.
If we do it at my conference rooms, they're all hotspot. I mean, they're all wired. You can log in on the host on the network. So
Is there
it's-
enough room for any attendees to come?
Yeah, the big room will hold, I have to go count. I think it's 25. So I can't imagine we'd have more than that show up in person.
Okay.
But
All right, yeah,
I'll,
just send us a address, please, sir.
yeah, it'll be somewhere. It's at the corner of Cool Springs and Carruthers. So it's like 3 blocks off of I-65. So it's pretty easy.
Okay.
And there's plenty of lunch choices if we decide we want to go eat.
Okay.
All right.
All right, well, thank you.
I think once we get through chapter 7, the rest of it's so much easier.
Yes, I agree.
Hey, can I just ask, I know y'all have been asked to and are doing a good job of expediting this process. Are we working towards a certain day that we're wanting to have a rules hearing or any kind of loose timeline or anything?
Mary Beth, you want to take that one?
Heather, what's the date that you said the red lines are going to be official at the Secretary of State?
So the red lines for this group, or the rules that are going into place now, will be effective July 1 of 2025.
Okay. So it really depends on the speed at which we get through this subcommittee. But from the time the subcommittee finishes and has a draft, then Chris, you're on this meeting still, right? Mr. Swan, can you hear me?
Here.
Can you kind of tell them, like, after the drafting phase, the steps that happen before we have the rulemaking hearing?
Yeah, let me pull it up. So once we
Real
get
quick.
through the editing and the committee meeting, it'll go through, the internal, so all the directors, and then let's see, general counsel, the commissioner will review it. And then after everybody internally approves it, it'll go to the governor's office for review. And then after the governor's office, you'll file it with the Secretary of State. And then once it's filed, 52 days from that filing date is when you'll have the rulemaking hearing.
The rulemaking hearing that the commission holds or that GovOps holds?
That the commission holds. So just like we did in January of 24, that rulemaking hearing is 52 days after we file with the Secretary of State. And then there's a 2-week comment period. And then legal will start editing. And then after that is when we start the process. After we get approval through internal legal, that's where we start the process with the Attorney General's office and the governor's office, and then eventually file with the Secretary of State again. So that the process from rulemaking hearing to enacting in 2024 is going to be January 29th, 24 to that July 1st of 25. So after the rulemaking hearing, probably something similar, year and a half. But then as far as prior to the rulemaking hearing, 52 days after we file with the Secretary of State, like Chris said, the internal stuff as far as the governor's office and the commissioner's review and the director's final drafts and things like that is really all going to be dependent on when this subcommittee wraps up.
So this one seemed extremely long. This is like my 3rd or 4th, 5th rulemaking process. Will it not be faster this time, or is that just the new norm?
I don't want to make a comment really either way on that, just because I can't anticipate what will happen, especially with election in 2026. And sometimes there's a rules hold after a new governor comes in. But as far as prior to that, the speed, well, the dates we set are statutory. The speed of how fast the other offices do it and how fast things go through our commissioner's suite is really just dependent on the size of the rule package and then also what other rule packages the state fire marshal's office is sending. So right now I know manufactured housing just put one up. There's always electrical and codes and stuff that go forward. So it's very case by case. I wasn't here prior to this rule package, but my hope is that we can expedite this one as quick as the statutes will allow.
Well, okay, so let's say we just attack chapter 7 because that's what's an interest to the lieutenant governor and to a lot of the representatives. Should we try to accelerate, maybe the in-person day, we do work 8 hours, this, because it seems like the sooner we turn it out, our odds are going to increase on getting it through. But I mean, if we finish our work in 2 months, you're saying it could still be a year to a year and a half before it becomes rule.
If we do a package that's the size of the one we just did, I wouldn't anticipate it to move much faster than a year.
Then I think we should really focus on just let's get this chapter 7 cleaned up and let's look to see what it affects in the other 6 chapters. And if it doesn't, well, we have to look at chapter 6 because we have to look at the NFPA standards because the way there's no consolidation standards listed in there. So we may have to look at sending 2 chapters to rule change. If Mary Beth, if I'm hearing you correctly, if we keep this as minimal as possible, we can look at the better outcome of it moving quicker.
I would anticipate if we have a smaller package, it would get approved faster. We still would be at the, approval of the other agencies.
We're still at their mercy.
Right. But if the quicker this subcommittee turns something out, the faster things can start moving. That being said, I know that if our goal is to continue to do this kind of on a rotating basis, whatever we don't do this time, we'll just be stuck with whatever rules we have until we do it again next time. So whether we do a very, very thorough one and fix everything, or whether we fix one chapter, it's just what we're going to be stuck with until we do another
I think we've got to fix chapter 7 in the interest of the declining numbers and the pressure we're going to get from Capitol Hill.
Right. Well, we definitely have to do chapter 6 as well with the NFPA standards. So, Director Zimmerman, if you would, and you and your staff go through chapters 1 through 5, because like I said, 6 we already know, and Greg can go ahead and have that ready for us to be able to look at and go through. But go through chapters 1 through 5 and see where the heartburn is, if we have to open up any of those right now. And if not, let's just focus on 6 and 7, get those out the door and try to get this done as quick as possible.
Yes, sir. We can do that. And to your point, we've got to be compliant to 1010 by 7/26 for some of them, and then 12/26. So we're kind of on a deadline on a really tight crunch to get 1010 changed in rule so that we can be compliant to the NFPA standards.
Yeah, because the unfortunate thing is I thought that we removed all NFPA standard numbers and did a referral to chapter 6 in the previous chapters, and that wasn't done. There are NFPA references between chapters, I want to say 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 that NFPA standards are actually called out by number where it should have been referenced to chapter 6. And I don't really want to open those up right now if we don't have to, because I want to be able to have the smallest package available so we can move this quick.
Absolutely. So we'll take a look at those and see if we can come up with something and bring it to the table in next month.
Mary Beth, if I can clarify one more question on what you said. I know once you have the rules hearing, I know a lot of it is out of the hands of the people on this call, but did I kind of understand you to say if even if this committee was able to approve something in June, which I know that would be a lot of work to get done by June, but if that happened, it would still roughly be 90 days or so before you could schedule a rules hearing.
So the internal review would start after we'd have to have a commission meeting for them to approve us starting the official rulemaking process. At that point, it would then go to internal review, which would include our general counsel as well as the commissioner. And then it would go, Chris, you said to the governor's office first. But we can't hear you, Chris.
You hear me now? Yes, it's the governor's office after the internal review.
Okay, and then what's after the governor's office?
That's when you file it with the Secretary of State.
Okay, and then there's 52 days. So it would really depend on the speed at which internal review happened and then the governor's office. And then we still, even if we filed it the day after we got it with the Secretary of State, we would have a 52-day waiting period prior to the rulemaking hearing.
So then the only other question on that, Mary Beth, is what is the legal time frame that we have to post a commission meeting? Is it 10 or 14 days?
I think the way we've always done it is just good notice, because we could even have seek approval for an emergency commission meeting. But if we would have 50, I'm sorry, if this subcommittee finished a final draft and everybody on this subcommittee was on the same page, we could then notice that commission hearing. Heather, do you know if there's an actual rule? I think it's just like fair notice.
So per the Open Meeting Act, it's, if I recall correctly, it reads something along the lines of a reasonable amount of time. It does not specifically state number of days. It says a reasonable amount of time.
And then we would just have to be concerned for quorum if we didn't have enough notice for all the commissioners to be in the same room or online, if we could get approval to do an online commission meeting.
So what I'm thinking is if we can have for chapter 6 and 7, if we could actually have a final draft done by say mid-July, we could have a commission meeting to review and go over this and approve it to move forward by the end of July. And so that way we could start the process of internal review come August 1st. Does that sound feasible? I mean, or reasonable, I mean?
I don't think legal would have any problem with that. I think it's just if you guys want to set that as a goal and we can aim for it.
David, what's that look like for you?
What was that date again? I mean, I'm pretty good in July.
Yeah, if we could actually have a final draft of chapter 6 and 7 done by mid-July and schedule a commission meeting for the end of August or the end of July for us to review and approve. And then that way, August 1st, internal review can start their process and we can get this ball moving.
Yeah, because the only thing, Southeastern Association of Fire Chiefs is here in Franklin the middle week.
Right. Right.
15 to 18 or whatever. And then if anybody wants to go to the Tennessee Sheriff's Office, their conferences in Sevierville, the 28th to the 30th. So those are the two big conferences in July. So yeah, we probably could we can get them, because we already said we might have a fire chiefs meeting on the 29th. So we may just have to move that around a little bit.
Sherrod?
I'm good with that.
All right. How's that sound for a good goal?
It's a goal.
Like it.
All right.
I'll
Josh,
like it as
I
well.
think you had one more thing you had wanted to say.
No, sir, that was everything. Just, I mean, even once it goes to rules hearing, you know, you can still make small changes. So the quicker you get that ball rolling, the better.
That's the goal.
Like she said, if it doesn't get pretty far along by the middle of next year, it could just get put on hold permanently till 3 or 4 months into the next administration. So timeline has got to be as quickly as we can make it.
Yeah, because if it would take, if in the dream world, it could take effect by July 1, 2026, all those volunteers could sweep, they'd have 6 months to sweep back in to next year's salary supplement.
Yeah.
Nothing, there's nothing we can do for 25. That's toast. We're cooked on that. But even if we gave them 6 months, it would increase the numbers dramatically for next year. Salary supplement for EIP, BEIP.
Right. You definitely want it to kick in before the firefighter one requirement kicks in.
Yes. Yeah, because we'll have 0
Right. Well,
or close to it.
Okay.
All right. I'm over now. I gotta get downtown Franklin.
All right.
Y'all have a enjoyable weekend. I guess it's supposed to rain some more. Don't forget, it's Mommy's Day.
Thanks for the
Important-
reminder.
It's an important day on Sunday. Don't be making her cook a big meal. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, gentlemen.
See y'all.
Appreciate it.
Wait, Scott has something. What, Gunny?
No zero. What was that chat? I missed it. What do you say? No zero. Some of our have made it.
I said not all zero. Some of ours have made firefighter one in a timely 1 year and a half.
Right. It won't be
back.
0.
All right.
All right.
Good deal.
Bye.
y'all have a
All right.
good one. Good to
Thank
see you.
you.
Y'all too.
Bye-bye.